Mod Ed, welcome back to the Sae Bae cast. How you doing, man?
No, I'm doing pretty well, thank you. Thank you for having me back.
It's always a pleasure. I believe our first conversation we had a couple years ago at this point. I mean, that one was truly just amazing hearing the development of the game through your eyes. We got a lot of sweet topics today. And of course, we got two massive pieces of content coming up very soon. And I want to get your perspective on all that, if that's cool with you.
Yeah, sounds good.
So I guess we'll start off with just like, what have you been up to lately in the office? And also, how much is still work at home versus going into the office?
It varies a lot. So Jagex is still fully remote, but we do still have the office. So some people take full advantage of fully remote and don't go into the office that often. Some people quite like to use the office. I think quite a few of us who are sort of around pre-COVID times, pre the dark times. We like live pretty close to the office still. So like if we go in like semi-regularly, we go in like probably a couple of times a week. Been in quite a bit recently because I guess onto the other half of your question, there's a little quest that's coming out very, very soon. We are literally now in the final stages of finishing off the Blood Moon Rises, which is always I've done quite a few of these quests now, quite a few big projects in general, and the last few weeks, like they never change really. They're always sort of like simultaneously, as you can probably imagine, very cool. This is the bit where you see everything finally come together. You get to see what the finished product's going to look like. Also, incredibly stressful because you're like, oh my god, this is the bit where we need to get all the final things ready, everything finally put together, and oh my god, hopefully it's good. Hopefully we've not made something terrible.
I'm
Yeah, we have been all in on that.
yeah, it's dropping June 30th for those listening, which is very close. So that's good to hear. At least it's in the final stages and it should be released on that day. Is that correct?
Yep. I think we are. I can never say anything 100%. You never know what crazy things might happen, but barring anything super crazy, I think we are pretty much locked in for the 30th. Like we are. So the way we normally work is like development like officially concludes normally 2 weeks prior to the release. So that would technically put the end of development its last day like literally in a few days from now. So we are literally in the final like couple of days of work on this.
Wow. Okay, so I have several questions. A lot of it's going to be lore related, but first off, what are you most excited for players to experience during the quest? If it's not too much leaking, you know.
It's always a hard thing, isn't it? So I mean, I guess the boring answer, just sort of like in general, like this is a fun little piece of like RuneScape history that we're working on here. Like the Myreque storyline, it's been going on since like forever. I mean, when people were playing the first few quests in this story, they'd have been like kids sort of thing, and now they're fully grown adults finally experiencing this finale. So just in general, it's very exciting, a little bit terrifying for people to finally be experiencing that. I mean, to be honest, it's obviously, like I say, like a bit of RuneScape history there, but it's quite personal to me as well. Like I didn't start this storyline, obviously I inherited it. I hope I've done it somewhat justice inheriting it, but like it's still like one of the earliest quests I worked on was A Taste of Hope. That'd have been what, like, must be talking 8 years ago now. Like it was the first quest I worked on after finishing Dragon Slayer 2. So like I guess even for me as well, like at Jagex, like this has been like something that's been with me for most of my time at Jagex, seeing that come to an end as well. So just in general, people finally experiencing that, like I say, is very exciting. But I say that's also kind of a bit of a boring answer. If you want something more specific, what can I say without spoiling too much? There's a big moment in this quest that I've alluded to a couple of times, like when we've like talked about like live streams and stuff like that. This something that we've kind of it's not necessarily something like we've never done before, but something we're really sort of trying to like push beyond what we've ever done before with like narrative and storytelling. This like big moment in the quest, and I'm really excited to see people experience that. Again, obviously, something we've never really done before, at least not to this level. So also little bit nervous. What if it doesn't land? But really hoping it doesn't. Really hoping people enjoy that moment. Obviously, I can't really say too much more about what the moment is because I don't want to. I don't want to spoil it. I think the part of what makes the moment so good is the not knowing about it, sort of thing. So I'll leave people wondering. The beauty of this as well is that if that moment ends up being completely and utterly rubbish, I can just say no, that wasn't the moment I was on about. No, it was something different.
Beautiful. Yeah, no, I think it is best to keep it a surprise. Well, one of the interesting things, I'm actually looking at your wiki page, just seeing all of the quests that you've done and all just the the sort of content you've worked on over the years. And I have to ask, because RuneScape, I feel like in my eyes had always been a sort of medieval game with dungeons and skeletons and zombies and stuff. And it seems like over the years we've gotten a lot more lighthearted sort of content that feels a little bit more fantasy vibe and just a little bit more I don't know, just sort of easygoing. And I wonder, for you personally, what do you prefer working on? Do you like those sort of darker storylines that have like real evil and have like some real, terrifying enemies and stuff? Or do you actually enjoy working on, for example, Riveting Tale of the lily pad labor dispute,
Yeah, so it's interesting because yeah, I mean, if you like look at the quests I've worked on, there is sort of like a recurring pattern for a lot of them. It's like, wow, Ed, you work on some really dark stuff. Is everything okay, mate? You got anything you need to talk about? Yeah, like I think it's fair to say that like some of the quests I've worked on have like been some of the darkest in game. There's a couple that really push it a bit, but I think that's sort of like that kind of naturally comes with the territory of like when you're working on the bigger quests. It just generally seems to be having sort of the bigger quests are normally the more serious ones. Like when you look at these big storylines, like Myreque, like those quests were dark from the get-go, sort of thing. So it's not really too surprising that working on quests like that is going to continue being dark. But to be honest, this is maybe a bit of a controversial thing for me to say. Like to be very clear, like I love working on these storylines. I love like that we're finally getting to include the Mikey storyline. That does mean so much to me. But I got the big quests, the big serious quests. They are such hard work. Like obviously, I've been doing quite a few of them now. I've been doing this for many years, and like it never gets bloody easier. Like they are so hard to make. Like you were just working on this one quest for like months on end, and like this, there's just so much expectation on it, especially this one with being a finale as well. It can sometimes be just really fun, and I must admit some of the most fun quests to work on have actually been like the ones where kind of all that pressure's gone. It's not some big serious storyline, always expectation of like 20 years into making that sort of thing. It's not like, oh, this big serious character moment and who's gonna die here and that sort of thing. It's just oh hey, what if there was frogs having some sort of labor dispute, or what if there was an egg that died? Like it's they are the small quests can sometimes be just really fun to work on. They're almost like they're a very nice palate cleanser. Like not often after working on something like big and massive, I mean like Riveting Tale. I think when even did Riveting Tale come out? I lose track
2024
now.
is showing here.
That was it, yeah. It was the first batch of Valve, so start of 24. So Riveting Tale, like, would have been probably not quite the next quest I worked on after Desert Treasure 2, but one of the next quests I worked on after Desert Treasure 2. And yeah, it's like just the perfect like little palette, because after doing something so big and epic and serious like Desert Treasure 2, it was just really nice just to go, I'm just going to make something that's completely and utterly stupid. It's the funny quests, like, they are just, they're fun to work on.
Absolutely. Do you feel like there's sort of a necessity to add palette cleansers in these darker themed quests? So like this Grandmaster Blood Moon Rises quest, is it essential for there to be some sort of like a decent amount of humor in it, or do you think it sort of detracts from that darkness you want to capture?
It's a really delicate balance, I find. Like, I mean, like you see it like when you play other games and watch films and stuff like that. You see like where some get it really right and others just get it really wrong. Like you see people like and hear people like talk about sometimes like, oh, I was watching this film and there was this really impactful character and I was really getting into it, and then someone had to drop some quip just to lighten the mood again. It really took me out of it. Like it's so easy to get wrong, but at the same time, like when you're working on something that's so dark and grim, like you don't want it. It's still a video game. It's still meant to be fun. Like you still want to have these like elements of like just little drops of humor here and there. So like with a Blood Moon Rises, it is a very serious quest. It is one of the most serious quests we've done, and there is very little room for humor in this one. We've tried to find like a couple of like places to drop it in naturally, but yeah, we've definitely not gone overboard. At least I hope not. We'll obviously find out soon enough. I think especially with a game like Old School as well, where it's not like we release a quest map is in itself a self-contained game. Like the beauty of Old School is variety, variety in everything, but variety in storytelling as well. It's fantastic. I love working on a game. There's not many other places I'll be able to work on a game like this. There's not many other games that work like this, where because the world is so vast and varied, that I can do a Desert Treasure 2 and then follow it on with a riveting tale. Like those just complete contrasting tones. I think that's a place where we can sort of get that variety in. So like, it's okay for serious quests to be unashamedly serious, albeit maybe with a couple of little drops of humor here and there, as long as we make sure we're also finding time for the small fun ones as well. Which I don't think we used to be very good at that. We're still not perfect, but I think we were really bad at one point of like forgetting about the small little quests, which is like right on to the next big serious one. I think with quests like Scrambled, Riveting Tale, that sort of thing, we're starting to get a little bit better at finding time for those like fun little ones.
This is sort of a broader general question about examine texts. And I wonder, in these new quest areas, who's the one working on these examine dialogues? And do you think it's essential for examine text to sort of liven the mood a bit?
Examine text is so fun. They you don't get too many games that I guess have that sort of thing, to be honest, and like especially an Old School like where pretty much everything can be examined. And I know we've done a couple of pieces like updates in the past where there wasn't enough things that are examinable, and people rightly so criticize us like no, we want the examine texts. But yeah, like examine texts they can be really quite fun, and like there's not really any like proper ownership over, I guess. It really does depend a lot, like who's writing them. Like the art team might make examine text, like when they're making like I guess individual like assets and stuff like that for environment, they might put some fun examine text on. Like maybe someone on the design team might put some examine text on. So they quite often sort of like come from like all sorts of different people like contribute to the examine text. There's no sort of like real like I guess plan behind them, but I think that works quite well. It means they just happen quite naturally, and I think the end result of that is, yes, sometimes you get some examine texts that are maybe a bit boring. Personally, I think that's okay, because I think that makes the fun examine text even more fun. If everything had like a quirky examine text, I think it would lose the impact a bit. But it's just really fun. Like, and we've tried to include a few fun ones in Blood Moon, where like you're going around, and you examine things, just like okay, yeah, cool, like basic examine text. I mean, you just examine this one thing, it's like, oh, that's got something fun there. And yeah, they are definitely a fun way of introducing humor. I like to, where possible, still have the humor kind of like match the tone a bit. So, for example, for Blood Moon, it's a dark, serious quest. So I hope there's a couple of fun little examine texts in there that hopefully people find, where it's just like it's real like dark humor, like really just like goes in, it's like about there being blood everywhere and stuff like that. Like it just embraces that, which is quite fun as well. Because they're fun little place where you can do things like that too, which is nice.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I've always enjoyed examine text, and I've there's a few that always that I think of that are just hilarious. That they're just so dry, yet they just hit so differently. And then you got the examine text where it's like a bush, and you examine it, it just says a bush. It's like, what was the point of examining this? But it is cool that I mean, that honestly, that's one of the most charming things about this game is nearly everything has an examine text with something going on, which is just awesome. I want to ask about Vampyrium, which is the new area unlock that we get from completing the quest. And I'm sure during the quest we're traveling throughout it. Can you give us a rundown and maybe some hidden lore about this new place that we're about to explore?
Yeah, so this is it's not something we've never done before in Old School. Like I mean, take Fairy Tale for example. We've had the player visit these strange lands beyond Gillinor, but it's something we don't do too much. I mean, and probably rightfully so, to be honest. Like old school, it's just that it's old school. Like you want to stay on Gillinor, doesn't ever want to start feeling too sci-fi. It's not that kind of game. But sometimes we do get these fun opportunities to I guess push the bow out a little bit and visit an area that just starts to feel a little bit more alien. And Vampyrium is very much like one of those areas. It is this land that is far beyond Gillinor. It is not of Gillinor. It is another world. It is the world where the vampires originated from, and it just felt so fitting when working on Blood Moon Rises that this is obviously an ending. It's the big conclusion, but for that conclusion to use it as an opportunity to, I guess, revisit the past as well of the vampires and go all the way back to the beginning. Like we've seen the vampires as they are now in Morytania, but going back and seeing this world where they used to live, and we've got some real fun stuff in this quest where you kind of are almost like walking through the history of Vampyrium and the vampires. Obviously, I don't want to spoil too much, but it is kind of like you go to Vampyrium and like you experience these like different places at different points in the vampire's history there, and you see it all the way from like the very beginning, when the vampires on Vampyrium initially to start with, they were quite tribal, quite animalistic. They lived in these like clans, sort of like moving around a lot, didn't really have proper homes and that sort of thing. And it wasn't until after being living on Vampyrium for a very long time that they started to become more civilized, I suppose, more cultured, and then you see them starting to slowly transform into more like the vampires that you see now in Morytania. They start having these big fancy houses and wearing fancy clothes and that sort of thing, and you literally, while exploring Vampyrium, you're going to be able to like see that transition, and that's going to be it's really it's going to be really fun to sort of see people experience that. It's like it's been a great opportunity to add like all this history on the vampires, and like, don't get me wrong, the vampires are evil. You're not going to come out the end of this quest thinking anything otherwise, but it's going to be quite fun, I think, for people to sort of see, like, oh, so this is how they ended up where they are now.
Yeah, that's exciting. I wonder, is there going to be a similar vibe, and maybe you're not going to be able to share, because I don't know if the rewards are all revealed, or not even just like item rewards, but other things. Because when you complete the Monkey Madness quest line, you're all of a sudden able to just roam around Apatoll without being a monkey. And I wonder, in Darkmire or in Vampyrium, will you be able to kind of travel freely without getting attacked, abruptly, without wearing your noble outfit? So is there any of that, or is the noble outfit still going to be required for Darkmire and Vampyrium?
So it's always a difficult one. This, like, something that people sort of brought up before, like, oh, how much can actually change in an MMO like this? Like, Morytania can't just suddenly become this like nice happy place, all sunshines and rainbows, a sort of thing. Like, that just would never work. It wouldn't be like possible technically, but also like, imagine taking a place iconic as Morytania and completely like killing the entire vibe of a place. So there is sort of like there's a balance there, and like I think it's important to like set expectations very clearly as well. Like I hope no one's expecting to go to Morytania and post this quest and suddenly find it's all lovely now. It's all nice. Like, Mauritania's like, it's the way it is. Obviously, the vampires have played a big role in that, but like it's been the way it is for like narratively for like thousands of years now. Like, it's not suddenly changing back. This is the way Mauritania is now, and any dealing with the vampires and their rule of Mauritania will very much be sort of about adapting to this Mauritania and making it better for the humans living there, not just turning it back into what it was before. So Mauritania is still going to be a grim, dark place. It's not going to be the kind of place you want to go on holiday, sort of thing. But that said, we do also very much want to show like that things are changing as a result of like what the player's doing in this quest and that sort of thing. So like Darkmire is still going to be Darkmire post quest, but there will be like changes to the way things like As you may guess, I'm really struggling. I'm trying to find a way to word this without spoiling too much. But obviously, right now, you go to Darkmire, you see vampires like nibbling on slaves, and there's like a slave auction and stuff like that of humans and stuff like that. Obviously, stuff like that may well change.
Ooh.
Things like your Via Noble outfit. Yeah, you might not need that anymore. And we've come up with some like fun little creative ways to make sure that these changes don't impact the gameplay either. Because obviously, one of the better or for worse, one of the benefits of Darkmire right now is that you can just stand there and the vampires just keep aggroing on you because you're not meant to be there, which is very useful for hunting down your blood shards. So we obviously need to make sure that gameplay like that isn't impacted by any potential changes there either. So we've had to do some like fun little things to make sure that you can still have the same gameplay whilst it's still feeling like things have changed.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Okay, there's some new creatures being introduced into Vampyrium. One of them, I might pronounce this incorrectly, Stimfikes. Is that how you pronounce it?
Yep.
Okay. And Venators. And Venators, I believe, are the new NPC that's actually going to give a more generous drop rate to blood shards. But can you go into, I guess, a little bit of lore of what these things are and what they mean to Vampyrium and maybe like how old they are as well? Because I know vampires are thousands of years old.
Yeah, so very early on when we were first sort of like decided like we want to do Vampyrium, like we knew it was important that it wasn't just like it's kind of like as I mentioned before, it's an alien world. It didn't just want to feel like Gielinor again. So we knew it needed to be more than just like the vampires. I mean, say more than just vampires. Like the vampires obviously left long ago. Like so, what other wildlife would be living here? And we didn't want it to just be like stuff from Gielinor. We wanted new stuff. So we've got this fun like range of new creatures on Vampyrium. Like the idea is that these creatures have been like we've been living there since forever. This is the wildlife of Vampyrium, and some of them are, I guess, kind of like equivalents to like Gielinor creatures, and like sort of show this idea of like, what would happen if you took like a bear, but rather than evolving in the world of Gielinor, it evolved on Vampyrium instead and had to adapt to the hostile land of Vampyrium. How would it be different? Now we've got some that are just sort of like completely wild, new, different, and not really any like thing comparable to them. And yeah, it's like I think it really sort of like helps like sell Vampyrium as sort of like this dark and dangerous place where you see all these like horrible creatures that even for vampires didn't like some of them, and it really like helps sell this like whole like feel like, oh, this is not a nice place. Obviously you mentioned Stimfikes, they're one of them, and with them and a couple of others, we've also then used them to like integrate them into like the new skilling activities you'll be doing. But then there is others that are just, I guess, like flavor. What we've tried to do, even for ones that just flavor, we've tried to give them all some like just something like little and fun. Some like fun little twists, like not even something that really like matters, to be honest. Like most of these creatures are just flavor, like they're not going to have any gameplay impacts, but even those ones we've tried to give them like some just like fun little combat mechanic, just a little bit you go, oh god, oh, this place is horrible. And then yeah, we've then also, as I say, got the ones like you got the Venators, which are the new Slayer creature, and you got the Stimfikes, which you are the new hunting method. And we've got the Leechfin, which is the new fishing method as well, which everyone definitely knows about Leechfin without blogs, so we had to put that with bloody sandwiches.
Is there any connection between these new Venators and the Venator shards from Phantom Muspa?
Kind of. It's so. I have seen some people like trying to work out like what there's some weird gameplay link to it. It's like no, it's not a gameplay link. It's just a fun little bit of narrative. I know some people like don't like it when we do this. I know some people have mixed opinions of when we like have things that are completely separate gameplay wise, but they share like some sort of name due to like narrative connections. But personally, I don't know. I quite enjoy that. And in this case, it's because the word Venator, it means hunter in the Zarosian language that was adopted in the Zarosian Empire. It came from demons initially, but then it was sort of used like all across the Zarosian Empire, which the vampires were once part of. That's like another big part of their history, was being part of the Zarosian Empire. so you see these things. It's kind of about like showing just how wide-reaching the influence of the Zarosian Empire was, in that word hunter, vampires, applied it to these creatures from their home world, and then like a completely other part of the world. Say a part of the world is obviously not in the same world. On Gillinor, you then got the Venator being used for like other things like the bow and stuff. It's a fun little narrative thing that even though Zaros' empire, they're not really part of what we're doing here with the Blood Moon Rises. They don't really play a role. That again, that is still a huge important part of their history. The vampires were part of the Zarosian Empire, so it's like a fun way of showing just how wide-reaching the empire was. So I quite like doing little things like that. I know some people, they're not a fan of it. We've had that feedback. I mean, take the quest name itself. Some people have said like, "Oh, I don't like it's called the Blood Moon Rises because it makes me think of a boss in Varlamore." But I don't know. I quite like sometimes doing little things like that. It's important not to go overboard. Of course, you don't want things to get too confusing, but it helps make the world, I think, feel more real. That not everything is completely unique. There are these fun like links and stuff like that, or even just like taking the name for example. Like, I mean, for a lot of this stuff, obviously, the first thing we use for inspiration is real life, and we see like all these different cultures that never interact with each other. They all have this obsession with the moon. That's not really surprising. Like, you think of like, a few thousand years ago, before they knew all the things we know now. Like, yeah, the moon was pretty fascinating. You can understand why lots of different cultures would gain this fascination with them. So it made perfect sense to us that the vampires would have this fascination for the moon, but then so would other like civilizations. So yeah, stuff like that. It makes the world feel more real, I think.
Yeah, that's a good point. So there's also a new boss coming out, the Maggot King, which apparently, according to what we've seen, is going to be in somewhere in between Fasani's Nightmare and Inferno in difficulty. Which, if it's closer to Inferno, that's going to be quite a grind and quite maybe an intimidating fight for those that are a little bit newer to PVM. But what can you share about the Maggot King, and maybe even a little bit about the gameplay itself, if you know much about the mechanics?
So I'll openly admit, like, combat not my specialty. I think a lot of people would say that difficulty is always a fun one when we sort of describe difficulty. I think we've sometimes got it wrong. I think describing difficulty in the past, but also I think it is a very hard thing to describe because there's been so many times when we've tried to describe difficulty as careful as possible, and people just pick up on things and just go, "Oh, it's going to be this, it's going to be that." We're like, "Oh God, oh no." Difficulty is so subjective as well. I think that's one of the most challenging parts about it, and we had it a lot, I think, with Colosseum and Doom of Mokyotl as well. Like, people really got hung up over like what we meant by difficulty there. Like, to be honest, I couldn't really tell you how difficult the Maggot King is. Like I say, combat is not my area of expertise. To be honest, everything seems difficult to me. I look at it and go, "Oh, that's difficult. That's hard. That's challenging." As far as I'm concerned, it's all end game. To be honest. Yeah, I think a lot of this stuff is really subjective. I think what we have tried to do with a lot of the combat for both the quest and the post-quest content is we've tried to make it, I guess, feel a little bit different. I think we're very conscious of the feedback that we sometimes get of like, "Oh, what flavor boss are we having today? Are we having the prayer flicking boss? Are we having the shadow on the ground that you need to dodge boss? Or are we having the chip damage boss? Or a bit of all of them?" And it's sort of like,
Yeah,
it's always that balance. Because on one side, it's sort of like what you're describing there is old school RuneScape's combat system, and it's always just sort of like, I don't want to sound too defensive, but it always just feels a little bit silly. So when some people sometimes criticize, "Oh, it's another boss that functions like a boss in old school," it's like, yeah, no shit, Sherlock. It's using the old school combat system. Obviously, it's going to feel like an old school boss, and isn't that what we want anyway? Isn't that why we're here? We're the guys that don't like change. We like things as they were, sort of thing. It's like that sounds very defensive though. So on the flip side, I do obviously like that aside, like totally get it as well. Like, it's important that things don't feel too samey. Like, it's exactly the thing that I was on about with quests earlier. Like, one of the biggest benefits of a game like Old School is just the amount of content, the variety of content. You don't want to just be playing the reskin version of things every time. And I think some of the combat encounters in this quest are going to, and again post quest as well, things like the Maggot King 2 are going to be quite fun because they do a few things that, like, hopefully still very much feel old school, like feel like old school combat. I mean, we're kind of limited by what we can do with such an old game anyway, but hopefully like put some new like twists on it. And from that, I think we will get a few people quite feeling like they're too hard. Maybe I think other people they'll just get it right away. And that's the other thing about like subjective difficulty. Whenever you have something new, it's so easy to think, oh, that's impossible, that's super hard. I think we'll get some. I reckon on launch we're going to get some people going, wow, that is way too hard. But then they'll probably realize, oh, actually, it's just doing something a little bit differently. And once you get used to it, it's like, oh, actually, no, it wasn't so bad.
Yeah. After all the guides come out and everything, that's when things.
Yeah. Yeah. After you got the guides.
Yeah. So what is unique about the Maggot King lore wise? I mean, I don't know much about this thing. I'm looking at it right here, and it is just disgusting abomination. It almost looks like the Sea Slug King or whatever that thing is, plus a Phantom Muspa sort of mixed.
Yeah, I think with the Maggot King, it kind of all started with that same sort of like conversations I was mentioning earlier about just, like the creatures on Vampyrium in general. Like, whatever. Again, like variety is like so important. So when we come to like designing a new boss, one of the things we always want to do is not just make it like unique combat wise and like visually, but also like what's the narrative behind it. You know, sometimes we do these bosses where it's like this like ancient general, like the boss is kind of like a character in its own right. They have a huge backstory. I mean, other times we just do ones where it's just no, there's no like super in-depth backstory behind this. It's just some god awful horrible creature, and the Maggot King definitely falls into that category. It's like we're coming up with all these creatures for Vampyrium. We're like looking at what have we already mentioned in lore before? What have RuneScape 3 mentioned in their lore for Vampyrium? And how can we like make some nasty creatures? And for the boss, for the simple conversation was, well, this is the boss. This has to be the nastiest of them all. It has to be the most disgusting. And it was I'm trying to remember now. I think it was like a book that was added to RuneScape 3 that described a little bit about Vampyrium, like their version of Vampyrium that we took some inspiration from, and it mentioned these maggots and didn't really say much about them, but we're like, yeah, cool, maggots, that's a good starting point. What can we do with maggots to make them as disgusting as possible? And we ended up coming up with this idea of these maggots that literally like grow inside other creatures and like burst out, and that's how we end up with this boss. It's like it's actually a dead Venator. Like that's what the bottom half is. It's a Venator that's died because this maggot has like grown inside it and come bursting out.
I see it now. Yeah, that is horrible.
We looked at things like, as you can probably imagine, Alien being like a very like obvious reference there. It's sort of like Vampyrium is meant to be grim and scary, so we looked at like some like horrors and stuff like that to get some sort of inspiration. That body horror is always like one of the most horrifying things. Like it's just sort of like oh god, you can like, oh, what if that happened to me, and that sort of thing. Is like this idea gets your skin crawling and that sort of thing. So that was like the direction we ended up going with.
You know, I wonder, would it be possible, and also would it remain old school if in this mechanic exclusively you were to add a different player death animation where there is a maggot, you know, kind of like the same Alien theme where it just bursts out of your stomach when you die? Like, I wonder, is that a possibility? I mean, I know now there are so many different death animations from leagues and other things, but what if it did override it, and just in this situation a maggot bursts out of you right before you respawn in Lumbridge?
Yeah, it's probably not something we've actually done enough of, to be honest, with this kind of thing. I think we did it in the Colosseum. That had like a custom death anim, I think it was like the what was it?
Doom? Oh, the Doom Scorpion thing? Or yeah, Doom.
That was it, yeah. So we've done it a couple of times, but it's like it feels like there's potentially some untapped potential there. We did something similar with the Nightmare. That was another one where we tried to do like a little bit of that sort of like body horror type thing, where we had the the mechanic of the I can't remember what they call it now. I think it's called parasites. Like the parasites growing inside you and then like bursting out.
Yep.
Yeah, it'd be really fun to like just get some like absolutely horrible death anims of like.
It's for real. That'd be sick. Is it sort of like, I wonder how difficult that is to sort of code over. It must not be too difficult, but I wonder, how the community would react to maybe something that's not just the classic sort of death animation. But then again, we already have different death animations that people use all the time that other people see, so maybe it wouldn't be that big of a deal.
Yeah, it's always that balance, isn't it? The OG Death Additive is so iconic. I mean, it's so silly. It's such a silly animation where it just sort of like folds in on themselves. So like, it is so iconic. Like you can't ever take that away. Like it's so important. But yeah, I think for like one-off piece of content, like putting in some like fun death anims could be quite fun. Like they're not particularly challenging to actually like implement. Really, like there's always a bit awkward doing things with death because there's so many different variables. But just making the anim different, it's not too hard. But I think it's not something we've done too much of. It will be a fun thing to do more of.
Yeah, that could be interesting. One of the things that you mentioned that you'd like to touch on is just how cutscenes get made and also working with audio on quests. What can you say about these sorts of cutscenes that do get made and how they've sort of evolved over time? Because again, if you look back at those super early quests where you see a camera panning and it is just jank out of control and you don't really know what it's looking at, what has been the sort of evolution? And I guess just with this quest in particular, how have those cutscenes been made?
Yeah, so cutscenes, I would actually say cutscenes are maybe one of the things that have evolved like the most when it comes to like old school, especially for like quests and narrative. Like as you say, like you look at cutscenes from some of the really old quests, like pre-old school quests, and like they look quite interesting. So it's I'd kind of actually love to sort of like show at some point exactly how we make cutscenes because it's probably not the way anyone would really expect. I mean, especially anyone who's sort of like done this, I guess, kind of stuff before, which like obviously quite a few people obviously like dabbled with like making like cinematics and stuff like that. We do not make cutscenes the way people make their fun cinematic piece of content. Our cutscenes are. So our cutscenes are fully scripted. They're fully done in RuneScript, the in-house language we use to make everything else. And what I mean by that is like we don't like enter like the 3D space and like say position the camera here. We have a line of script that says move the camera to this coordinate at this height above it, and then from that coordinate move the camera to this coordinate, this height above it, and do so in this amount of time. And that's specifically done in like the time is done in they're called animation cycles. So most people know about server cycles or ticks as they're normally called, 0.6 seconds. But we also have animation cycles, which how many of those? There's 30 animation cycles to a tick. Someone will have to do the maths and work out exactly how long that is because I can't off the top of my head. We do it animation cycles, so it's like 300 animation cycles. It's now going to move here, and it's going to move like this. But none of it is visual. It's all just like lines of script one after the other, and it is an absolute nightmare because you're creating something that is so visual, but you're doing so with just like with code basically. It's just numbers and letters on a screen, like, and trying to turn that into something visual, like it is so challenging. And like obviously, as I say, some of those old cutscenes in game, they're a bit interesting, but I can't be too harsh on the people making them because having now done a lot of quests, made a lot of cutscenes, like holy shit, like they're horrible. They're so horrible. But as I say, they're also something that has sort of evolved quite a bit in old school. We some of that's sort of due to necessity. Like as we've been making more and more quests, I think like we'd have gone mad if we kept having to make cutscenes the exact same way. So like we have actually had quite a lot of like new stuff from the engine team to help us like make these cutscenes. They're ultimately still commands, none of it's visual. The dream is ultimately to one day have like an actual tool where you can like create a cutscene and like see it in game as you're creating it. It's still all done in script, but we've had over the years like new commands that have made things like a little bit easier. Like for Desert Treasure 2, People are going to be like, oh my god, when I describe some of these, people go, oh my god, that's so basic. Like, you didn't have that before. For Desert Treasure 2, one of the commands we got was the ability to not just move a camera, but move it in an arc. So rather than it moving in a straight line, it would move in an arc shape instead. And that is obviously so basic. We couldn't do that before Desert Treasure 2. Desert Treasure 2 is the first quest where the camera doesn't only move in a straight line, it actually moves in like little circles and stuff like that. And like, you see in particular in like the big finale cutscene in Desert Treasure 2, like you can like tell, like if you look closely, it's actually like moving in like circles and stuff like that. And it's one of those things, and this is the other thing as well with like cutscenes, like a lot of the time you don't even notice, you don't even realize, but it's one of those things where the experience is still better, even if you're not fully realizing why. And for Blood Moon, we wanted to push the boat out a little bit. It's like cutscenes obviously are they're not gameplay. So you could sort of argue in a video game cutscenes aren't important, and like I do fully understand when people say that. I mean, I've played some video games where it's just sort of like it's cutscene after cutscene, right? 10-minute cutscene, 5-minute gameplay. Now another 10-minute cutscene. It's like it's too much. It's too much. Like I'm playing a video game here. I'm not watching a film. I love watching films, but I'm not here to watch a film. So like, you don't want to go all in on cutscenes. You don't want to do too much. But when we do them, I think we do want them to feel good. So for Blood Moon, we have tried to like push the boat out a little bit more with cutscenes again. Like I say, we got some new stuff for Desert Treasure 2, and we've got some new tech for Blood Moon. Still not able to visualize things. Still doing it in script, but there's a couple of new things that mean there's some cutscenes in Blood Moon that are doing things we've literally never done before. We've literally not had the ability to do things with cutscenes that we can now do, and that's gonna be quite exciting. I'm looking forward to people experiencing that. It really changes things up a bit in some of these cutscenes, and that's going to be quite fun for people to experience.
Very cool. And are these cutscenes? I mean, I'm imagine most of them are aligned with music. So are you behind the scenes with the music?
Yeah. So music is it's so important, I think, to narrative. And like you see people sort of say it's like, I love the music of Old School, but obviously I turn it off after a while because it gets so repetitive, and it makes perfect sense. Like Old School is a game where sometimes you are doing the same activity on repeat for hundreds upon hundreds of hours.
Yeah.
And listening to that one music track is probably going to get a bit grating. So it does create that. It's that weird thing where it's like everyone says, "Oh, the music for Old School is so fantastic. It's so like unique and so iconic, and it is perfectly old school. It's that perfect balance of like, that old classic MIDI style, but it does still feel like good enough that it's not just sort of like, it's not just a meme. It is music you can listen to and enjoy as well. It strikes that perfect balance between the two. But yeah, at the same time, fully understand why people turn it off a lot, but for quests, I think it is a different ballgame. We hear a lot of people say, "Oh, normally I have it turned off, but for quests I turn it on." And for anyone that doesn't, I always highly recommend. Like, fully understand you may not want sound and the music on a lot of the time. It gets a bit grating, but for a quest, we do try to make that sort of like nice curated experience where I think it's really worth turning the music on. Like, it is where music I think works best in Old School, the narrative. But of course I am biased, and yeah. On that note, for Blood Moon, we've got a lot of new music, and there's some that again, like really excited for. I have not personally contributed to music this time. We've got our very talented audio team. We've got obviously Mod Surma, a lot of people know and like the absolute bangers that he creates. And there's some stuff that I've been talking to him about quite a bit for Blood Moon. This sort of like this idea for something with the music that again can't really say too much because it'll spoil it. But what I guess what I can say is like we can jump back a bit and actually go back to Desert Treasure 2 again. There was something that we did in Desert Treasure 2, and this one I actually did do the composition for. I say composition. It's not a very fancy composition, I must admit. It's very basic, but did exactly what we needed it to do, and sometimes that's okay. So for the end of Desert Treasure 2, for the big cutscene before like the final fight, it's the culmination of like these four, I guess, almost like sub-quests you've been on, but also it's like, it's a culmination of kind of like all these other quests, all the Majarat storylines so far. Almost, we knew it was like this really big narrative moment. It's like really important, not just a culmination of what came before, but that cutscene is also a really bold statement for the future as well. I remember when working on Desert Treasure 2, we still got a lot of feedback, and to us, we still get it a bit now, even after Desert Treasure 2, to us, we get a lot of feedback from people saying, Old School's a bit too safe for its narrative, it just copies RuneScape narrative too much, and I entirely agree with that. Obviously, Old School and RuneScape narrative is always going to have some similarities, because they're set in Gillinor, there's always going to be those similarities. But Desert Treasure 2, I think, was very much like, this is going to show people that Old School RuneScape narrative is not necessarily just one and the same. Like, that cutscene was going to sort of like make it very clear that when you go into like the future Majarat quest leading up to the ritual, Ritual of the Majarat was obviously a really big quest in RuneScape 3, one of the most iconic quests, and everyone sort of like, it's kind of been a given that Old School will be doing some sort of ritual quest as well, but like, it's not going to be Ritual of the Majarat, it's going to be something very different, and that cutscene in Desert Treasure 2 was the thing that really made that statement. Anyway, by the point of that is that, like, I wanted that cutscene to like really sell that this is like a big impactful moment. But to do that, it also really needed to have this real proper like build up. So there was a few things that I knew I wanted to do with that cutscene. So the first one was it couldn't have any cuts. It needed to be one long smooth cutscene with the camera never actually cutting at any point, and that was only possible due to the new camera stuff I mentioned earlier. So you watch that cutscene, you'll notice the camera's always just panning around. It's never actually doing any proper cuts, so it never once do you feel like you've been taken out of the moment. And then the other thing was it needed to have this music track that just slowly built up in tension. It didn't need to be anything fancy. It just needed to very clearly say, we're building up to something here. And what I ended up doing was just created this, like I say, very, very basic music track. You could arguably you could debate whether it's even actually music. To be honest, it's just basically a ticking clock sound. And what it is like, it feels like this clock is ticking faster and faster as the cutscene progresses. And that's because it is literally doing that. And it was so satisfying after it released. I saw people saying, like, oh wow, it literally felt like the ticking was getting faster. And you're like, well, it literally was. It actually was. And the way we did that was we did something we've never really done before. Because like, how do you make the clock feel like it's ticking faster? I mean, you could just literally create a music track where the clock starts ticking faster and faster, but how do you do it at the right moment? Like, obviously the dialogue in Old School is unique, and it creates actually a little fun little challenge when we're doing like cinematic moments, like cutscenes. Like, you click through the dialogue at your own pace because it's not voice acted, so you choose the speed at which you work through it. And most games do not work like that. Maybe most games are voice acted, so it's the speed of a voice acting is what determines how fast you get through the dialogue, which means you can time everything up perfectly because you always know exactly how long it's going to be. We didn't know how long this cutscene was going to be because some people are going to go in and hold down spacebar and go, I don't care about the dialogue, fuck this shit. And other people are going to go in and laugh up every single word, sort of thing. Like, how do we make sure that we give both those groups an equivalent experience in regards to this building up? So what it actually is actually 6 different music tracks, each of them with the clock ticking at a different speed. And whenever the player moves to the relevant bit of dialogue or a relevant thing happens to amp it up a bit, that's when we change the music track. And we got some new tech that actually lets us crossfade properly. Before Desert Treasure 2, we couldn't crossfade music. Again, there's some compared to camera stuff. Some people would be sat there, it's like, wait, you could. There's all this basic stuff that you guys couldn't do. It's like that's the beauty of the joys of Old School. Yeah, we got this stuff so we could actually crossfade, and that way it feels like there's no break in the music, and it just feels like the ticking's getting faster and faster. And yeah, that's how we did that sort of like in Desert Treasure 2, and thankfully, it all worked. Like, people didn't even realize that it was actually multiple different tracks all just stitched together, and people were just like, wow, it felt so natural, which is spot on exactly what we wanted. And anyway, coming back down to Blood Moon, be having conversations with Mod Surma, and we've been planning some stuff to do something a little bit similar with some stuff in Blood Moon. So some real fun like musical stuff we're playing with, which will hopefully, fingers crossed, like I say, not long now, pay off really nicely, and hopefully people really enjoy it.
Super cool. I've always been a huge fan of the music in this game, obviously, and when I was playing a group Iron Man, actually, that was when I decided to do live streaming with the in-game music. And you're totally right about, like, if you're doing a grind for tens or hundreds of hours, just having the same music track on repeat is just draining. But you guys have recently added playlists, and you mentioned the crossfading of songs. And one of the final sort of finishing touches I think that the music player needs is whenever you open a clue scroll river, you complete a quest and it pauses the music, it always goes back to the beginning of that track. And if there was some way of resuming the track, I have no idea how difficult that is to implement. But then on top of that, allowing crossfade between songs.
Yeah, I'm super keen to like keep doing more with that stuff. Like, it's kind of wild that so many things just didn't exist for so long, and like we just didn't have a tech for it and stuff like that. The playlist stuff, that's something I wanted to do for a very long time. I was so glad when we finally got to put that in. And yeah, there's so much more I want to do. The one you mentioned about like quest ending, so we have a distinction like between, I guess, the music, which they're called songs, is what they call them, like the back end, like songs and jingles are the two different things. And it's really actually quite frustrating because they're actually just the same thing. Like they're completely identical. Songs and jingles are both just MIDI tracks. That's the MIDI tracks, just using the custom sound font that Old School uses. So like, regardless of actually like making them, they're identical. The only actual differentiation, when I say this, there's going to be people just like, this is so stupid. Why is Old School so stupid? It's like the only differentiation is the folder that you save them in. So if we save them in the songs folder, they are considered songs. If we save them in the jingles folder, they are considered jingles. And even though up to that point, like the way you make them is exactly the same, once you save them in one of those folders, the actual implementation after that is completely different. So for songs, they like typically are like full length music tracks, like a few minutes long, even sort of longer, and then sort of like ones that like play as you walk around the world, like you're fighting boss and that sort of thing. And jingles are the short little things that happen, like where you level up, where you complete a quest, that sort of thing. So like there is like distinctions, but like I said, it doesn't have to be. Like we could put a song in the jingle folder, a jingle in the songs folder, and then it would just work. There's no actual like differentiation there. But the way they're implemented, like technically, is like you can do more with songs. Like songs, you can where you can like crossfade them and stuff like that. But jingles are like super limited. Like you could literally just, like with our tech, you just say play this jingle, and it will just play that jingle. It'll stop the music. It'll stop whichever song is currently playing. Play a jingle. And then once that jingle ends, it will restart that song. We have no control over that, and it's something I really want to get the tech for from the engine team. Because I say, like, when you think about like before all of this, like the actual make, it's so silly that they are literally identical, and that all that determines the difference is you saving them in a different folder, and suddenly you can do different things with them. It's so like, yeah, it's beautifully old school, I suppose. Is the joys of working on a legacy game. There's always that balance of working on a legacy game. Like we like it for a reason. We like its weird old quirks. We don't want to change too much. But I think songs versus jingles is one that we can afford to be a bit more push the boat out with. So I'm hoping at some point, we can get that tech to actually do a little bit more with them, because I'd much rather do the thing of sort of like you fade the song out, play the jingle, and fade the song back in again. It should feel like nice, natural, and smooth, and that sort of thing. But yeah, right now they're just so limited for questionable reasons.
I mean, even if there was a jingle audio setting, we have 4 audio settings in the settings, and I'd wonder if we could actually add a jingle setting that would be like maybe just fully mute jingles, so you can always have the music continuously playing. and then the jingles are muted, or vice versa. So if you have like a whole stack of clue caskets you're opening and you don't want to just hear the same thing, you just want the music to continue playing, you'd have that option potentially. But again, some of the time, making this game a little bit more complex than it needs to be, kind of, again, like you were saying, sort of removes that charm and that clunkiness that we're all sort of used to and actually find quite charming.
The volume sliders is another really fun one because they are, once again, just so weird when you actually stop and think about it, like just how weird they actually are. And I think maybe what some people not actually even realize, like, why they're the way they are and how weird they are. So basically, we've got the four volume sliders. Master volume, that one's nice and straightforward. Does what it says on the tin. Controls all the other volumes simultaneously. Nice, brilliant. We like that one. We've got the music one that controls songs and jingles. Like you say, I'd love to be able to separate those two out because they do serve different purposes in game, like long songs versus short jingles, and you might want one or the other on one different volumes. So I'd love to be able to split those out. It's another tech thing where it's actually on the engine side that determines that. So we'd need to get something from the engine team. Used up all my requests recently on all that fun camera stuff for Blood Moon, which hopefully you'll enjoy. I say that. There is a couple of fun new audio things that Engine gave us for Blood Moon as well, which make things a little bit nicer. So they are helping us out a little bit with audio stuff, one step at a time. We'll get there. Anyway, sorry, as I was saying, you got songs and jingles are just under music as one side, but then it's the other two that are really quite fascinating and perplexing at the same time, where it's you have the sound effects slider and the area sound slider, and you read those and you kind of sort of semi-understand what all that means. Area sounds actually means atmospherics and stuff like that, and then sound effects is anything else, and that's kind of it's half true, but the reality is actually a lot more weird. And so when we implement sound effects, we basically implement sound effects in two different ways. We can implement a sound effect that plays for a specific player, and that player only. The sound effect is custom unique to that player. No one else hears it. That's one way we play sound effects. And the other way we play sound effects is basically we specify either a location or an entity. So it might just literally be a coordinate in game, like a tile in game, or it might be an entity, so an NPC, for example. And we play a sound on that location to a radius around it, and it'll be heard by anyone within that radius around it, and it'll also have a volume drop off. So the further away you are, the quieter it'll be.
Yeah.
Those are the two ways we implement sound effects. And so those two sliders, they're actually sliders for the two ways we implement things, which is really is definitely not how it should be done. So you look at other games, they have sliders for you might have a slider for combat sound effects, for atmospherics, for UI sort of thing, that kind of stuff. And we don't. We just have this area sounds, which sometimes means atmospherics, but not always, because actually what that is controlling is any time a sound is playing on one of those entities. So a lot of combat sounds are actually area sounds because they play on an NPC.
Yeah.
But not all of them. Some combat sounds aren't area sounds. Depends on the way they've sort of been implemented. Combat sounds for trigger on the player themselves will almost always be player sounds. And then you get this sort of really weird thing where you're attacking a boss, and your attacks on the boss are on one side, but the boss's attacks back are on another, and it's really annoying. Cause you're oh, but I need to have both those slides set to the same volume, but I also don't want to hear these other area sounds and that sort of thing. And it is such a nightmare. That is another thing that's sort of at the top of our list where we really want to get the tech for to do it better. Of it should not be this way. We should just be able to whenever we're implementing a sound, it shouldn't matter how we implement it. We should just be able to say this is a combat sound. We have a combat sound slider, so you can turn your combat sounds up nice and high if you need to hear them, and turn other things down, sort of thing. One day we'll get there. But yeah, that's another fun bit of old school tech jank that we've just. And the problem is with stuff like this, people say, people respond to us saying, well, why don't you just fix it? It's we are slowly, but it's always a case of priorities and stuff like that. And like I say, we did do some new audio stuff tech-wise for Blood Moon. We did some new cutscene stuff as well, but like there's only so many hours in the day. Maybe next time we'll do the slider stuff one step at a time. These ones are always the hard ones because they fall into that weird category of like most people would agree these are ones to fix, but there's always something you'd agree needs fixing even more. So like they never find themselves at the top of a priority list. It's always so hard to prioritize them because it's like, would you like your volumes to be better? Yeah, everyone agrees. But then would you also like this other thing sorting that's far more important? Like, yeah, no brain and like no shit. Like obviously we want that far more.
Yeah, I was just thinking about the area and the normal sound effects, and I was just thinking of, you know, a place like Wintertodt or a place like Shooting Stars, where you would think the area sounds are everybody else's pickaxes or axes, you know, doing the whole spec, you know, swinging and stuff. But if you're on a certain tile, I'm pretty sure how it works, at least I could be mistaken, but if you're on a tile with, you know, 60 other people stacked underneath you and you have normal sound effects on, you would think that's just your own axe or own pickaxe, but it's every single person on your tile, I'm pretty sure. And the area sounds basically have no effect with it. So you literally have to mute yourself swinging your pickaxe just to be able to mute everybody else as well. So another really quirky thing about the sound system. All right. We need to talk about, and you might cringe over me saying Raids 4, because I did talk to Mod Goblin just recently and he said, absolutely do not call it Raids 4. It is the Fractured Archive. So let's jump in. What is the lore behind the Fractured Archive? And I have several other topics I want to jump into with you.
Yeah, so Fractured Archive. Exciting. Our fourth raid, not Raids 4. So I think one thing that with raids is that I think it's really nice how, like, obviously we've only got 3, but each of the 3 it just feels like so different. And like when we were first sort of like planning another one, we were sort of like very early on, we're like, we want it to have that completely unique, different feel again. Like it's really nice that that you can go into like Toa and it's like you're tomb raiding now, but then you go into a Theatre of Blood, it's like it's a whole completely different like feel. And with raids as well, like we've experimented quite a bit with like different ways of doing like the narrative of a raid. So like Tombs of a Massacre does like narrative in like quite a fun way. It's almost like it's literally like the raid is like, in some ways it's kind of almost feels like a traditional quest. Like you've been given an objective, like you go in to save the 4 avatars of Tumakan, like and we literally have a thing where on your first playthrough, like you're actually saving them as part of that little mini quest that we included. Then on subsequent like raids, you're not seeing them anymore. Like the raid is quite literally like a continuation of a story. And then you have obviously like Chambers of Xeric, where like it's kind of there isn't any like current story being told. It's more about like delving into like history. Like you're seeing, like you're learning a little bit about Xeric's history there, but like you're not actually like doing anything to push any existing story along. And then you've got Theatre of Blood, which is kind of like sits somewhere in the middle, and some of like retroactive stuff there as well. And that initially it was a bit more standalone, but then we obviously added a quest later, and it was shit. And then we added another quest, and it was good. For that one, like so, like we tried doing different things like with each of them narratively as well. And coming to a Fractured Archive, the conversation kind of just sort of started with really like, how do we make this cool, unique, different again? One thing that we thought would be quite fun, quite interesting, is that around the same time we were working on While Gothic Sleeps, the port of While Gothic Sleeps, and obviously it's just that it's a port. It is an existing quest that people have played before, and we obviously made changes when we moved it into Old School, but for all intents and purposes, it is still the same quest. It is something that people have experienced before, and we were like, what if we used this? What if we took this quest that people are very, very familiar with and like a lot of people are very nostalgic about, and like did some sort of twist there of like have a raid that somehow links into this quest. So like you've got the quest itself, which is like very, very nostalgic, very old, people very familiar with it, but then like you do that quest and suddenly you get access to this raid that's all like, it's all new, but then it's also like twists on like existing characters that you know from like wider RuneScape lore. So this is the first. I'm sure I think I'm alright in saying that. Yeah, this is the first raid where obviously not including like side characters like the avatars in Tombs of Massacre, but actually like the actual encounters in the raid itself. This is the first raid where it's not just new encounters from a narrative standpoint. They're new encounters from like a gameplay standpoint. You've not fought these like bosses before or anything like that, but there's characters you'll be fighting and characters who'll be helping you that people will know from like wider RuneScape lore, and that's really quite fun and interesting. But we're getting to put like our own twist on some of these, and it's again, I guess kind of like similar to Desert Treasure 2, of sort of like say where I was saying that like it was a very bold statement, like we're not just doing things the exact same as RuneScape 3. Sometimes we'll use existing characters, but we're going to do something completely different with them. It's kind of another thing like that, where it's a fun opportunity to take some characters that people might recognize and do something fun, new, and different with them that takes them on their own sort of like path and known direction in Old School. And then the actual, I guess, like narrative for the wider raid itself is again something quite fun and different in that we were sort of talking about like what could we do with this raid that if we didn't do it, we probably wouldn't do. Like thinking about the Majarat storyline, we've got this plan for where it's going. We've got Lucian and the Stone of Jas, and we've got Sliske and the Elder Horn, and there's going to be this almost big culmination with those two and the other Majarat in this big finale quest that we'll do one day. But are there other characters, like smaller side characters, that probably realistically we're probably not going to be able to fit in the big Majarat storyline because there's already so much going on there, especially with us like taking this new direction with Sliske. So is there something else we can do with them? Can we include them in this raid? And is there artifacts and I guess MacGuffins from RuneScape lore that we can use in this raid that otherwise maybe we wouldn't have touched? And that's sort of what eventually led us to this whole idea that Guthix, he stored away a lot of stuff. He stored away the Stone of Jas to stop people getting it. The Stone of Jas obviously is this really powerful artifact, but it's not the only one. There's plenty of other powerful artifacts out there. Where did he put all of those? Well, he probably put them in some sort of archive. So we've got this archive that you are here to maybe a raid's wrong. Maybe this shouldn't be called a raid at all because you're not really raiding it. You're almost sort of like there to protect it. By raiding it, you are protecting it from all these invaders. Like the bosses you're fighting, they're the ones that are doing the raiding. And yeah, the end result is like I think something that again, like compared to the other raids, should hopefully feel like nice and fun, different, unique. And I think in some ways it is probably our most like narrative driven raid yet, just purely because you like got all these fun like characters that you might have seen before, like some you've seen before in Old School, some you've never seen in Old School but you might remember from playing like RuneScape back in 2008-9 sort of thing. And then we do obviously have some new ones as well, like we couldn't just do a raid with just existing characters, we made sure to include some new stuff as well. But yeah, it's really quite fun. It's probably our most, I think it's like going to be the most diverse raid yet as well, like in regards to like the variety of what you're encountering in there, and the narrative is very much so like enabled that, which is quite fun.
Super cool. Now, when you guys as a team were first ideating about Raids 4, were there other competing ideas beyond the Fractured Archive that were sort of, given a solid look at, and eventually you guys just landed on the Fractured Archive, or had this been sort of in the works for a while, at least in the like ideation space?
Yeah, so thinking back to like the previous raids, I know when we were working on Toa, like the pitch for Toa existed for I think like a good year, maybe 2 years before a third raid even got the green light. So like as soon as we came to doing that raid, like we're like, well, we've already got this pitch that's been sitting around forever that we'd already like ideated on for like say like a good like maybe longer than a year at that point. So it was kind of like a no-brainer, right? That's what we're doing for Toa. But then for when we were doing Tob, we went in with like kind of like no idea what we were going to do, and like for the idea for Tob very much sort of came about like during the design phase. It wasn't an idea that had been sat around for ages. Then for this one was kind of like sat somewhere in the middle. Like when we didn't have like some like solid, fully fleshed out idea to the same sense we had with Toa, but that we'd already sort of like had this sort of like rough idea of like we'd like to do something with Guthix, we'd like to potentially tie it to while Guthix sleeps in that storyline. So we had this sort of like rough idea that was maybe the direction we wanted to go in, but we hadn't really fleshed anything out like we had with Toa. So when we were like first ideating, we did a lot of fleshing out there, and ultimately then I think quite quickly decided that yeah, this is the one. This is the idea that's got legs. So there wasn't really too much that was like too heavily considered. There were a few like ideas that were thrown about though. Like there was Fremennik raid like came up a few times, and we were sort of like, we think that's cool, but we want to park that for now because there's some other stuff we want to do with the Fremennik, rather than just jumping into a raid with them. But there's some fun stuff we want to do with Fremennik. It just doesn't feel like quite the right time for it at the moment. Sailing raid came up. Obviously, we were working on sailing around the same time. That was one of those ones I was like, that's a really cool idea, but also, as cool as it is, it's also, let's not kid ourselves, a really, really bad idea. You're working on a brand new skill, and then we're going to start working on a raid, and we want to tie the raid to the skill that at the time hadn't even been released yet. Like that's a big risk. Like, it's still a really cool concept. I mean, but I mean, hell, look, sailing. I mean,
it hasn't quite landed with all the high level PVMers quite yet. So
yeah,
let's maybe
yeah.
not
I mean,
go there.
exactly. I mean, obviously, like sailing. Don't get me wrong. I think sailing is an absolutely fantastic skill.
Yeah.
Like, so much what it's doing is absolutely amazing. Like, I don't care what the naysayers say. Like, you're going to compare that to fucking like some of the other skills in game. Like, sailing is amazingly done,
Yeah.
but it would be very arrogant of me to say that and not openly admit that yes, the combat wasn't where we wanted it to be. Like, like I get why it happened. It's not, and to be honest, in hindsight, it's not really surprising. Like, we're working on a new skill that is focused on sailing, but we also want to add combat into it. At that point, you're talking about now 2 new skills rather than one almost. Like, combat is so complex that like it was maybe a mistake, to be honest, trying to integrate into sailing on launch anyway. It was probably realistically in hindsight always going to feel a bit lackluster compared to like the existing combat in game that has had like what 20 years to evolve to where it is. So yeah, in hindsight, probably wasn't the best idea. And yes, I think very much shows that we made the right call there to not do a sailing raid one day.
Yeah.
I think it could be a really cool idea to do one day, but sailing combat needs more work still, and then a lot more needs to happen before we can really be considering like a raid that blends like boat combat and on foot combat. So that one also got like ditched pretty quickly, that idea. There was another idea that was floating around that I'm hoping is considered for whenever we do a 5th raid. I don't really want to spoil it in case it is considered for 5th raid, but it involved like exploring an island, and it was a bit more like open-ended and non-linear, like rather than like this, like going down this like one path and doing boss, just this island with multiple bosses on it. You go kill them in any order you want, when you unlock like a central area where you kill the final boss. It was on an island, but it wasn't actually sailing linked in any way. Like I say, it's possible we might go back to that idea, so I won't spoil any more about it, just in case we one day do. But that was quite a fun one. But I think to us, by the time we were thinking about that one, we'd already, I think, pretty much settled on doing the Fractured Archive anyway. So we sort of like put that one on the back burner, on the shelf to maybe revisit one day. So yeah, like there was a few ideas floating around, but I think it was always very much like the Fractured Archive. It felt like the right one.
Yeah, that's interesting, just thinking about the ideation. And also, you're mentioning tying it in with sailing. I could have seen, Raids 4 being tied in just by simply sailing to the island, for example, and then that's where the raid is. But yeah, to actually start implementing combat. And you made a good point of just combat has got to simmer for the last 20 plus years and really build upon foundational aspects of what makes combat fun. Whereas, yeah, sailing is like, all right, let's just take this, brand new movement system that we just basically concepted out of thin air, and try to add some combat features that feel fun and engaging and not super clunky. And yeah, that would have been a nightmare. And honestly, I think it was actually a good thing to release sailing combat, because it at least enables hundreds of thousands of players to get their hands on it and to just be very upfront and honest about what needs improvement and stuff. And I think that's obviously the way forward into getting the improvements that are needed for the future, you know. And I wouldn't be surprised if it takes a decade for sailing to eventually like start implementing some high level raids intertwined in it. So let's talk. Well, you know, you kind of already gave the lore behind the Fractured Archive. Is there anything more you want to share about the Chasm of Tears and just the history of the ancient Gothixian temple?
Yes, I say like kind of already like I guess alluded to this a bit earlier, but I guess for anyone who wasn't aware that yeah, we're going back into that chasm again. This is the place where Guthix stored the Stone of Jas after waking up at the end of the God Wars and seeing all the gods causing a bit of a shit show and going, right, we're not having any of that. This is when he banished the gods. That's why the gods aren't on Gielinor anymore. And he took the Stone of Jas and he put it in this, I guess, this vault, like in this chasm deep below Lumbridge. And obviously, while Guthix sleeps, that's sort of the be all and end of it. Sort of like that's the Stone of Jas is there. That's the big shiny, and Lucian's come and taken it. And the Fractured Archive was sort of like built around this idea of like, well, where did he store everything else? The Stone of Jas would not be the only thing he took off the gods. He'd have taken all manner of like weapons off them and stuff like that, and gone, I'm going to put these somewhere safe so that no one else can get them. And if he's put the Stone of Jas down there, like it kind of makes sense that like he's probably stored other things like relatively nearby. He's concluded that this is a safe place to put things. Clearly, he was wrong about that because Stone of Jas got stolen, and now people are trying to steal stuff from Fractured Archive as well. But clearly, he concluded this is a safe place to store things. So it kind of made sense to us that he'd be storing other things down there. So you're going to go back down into that chasm, and like rather than going through to where the tormented demons are and where the Stone of Jas was, you're going to take this sort of like this other tunnel that will lead to like I guess other sections of this archive where other things have been stored, and that's where this raid's going to take place.
Very cool. Okay, so this is actually something that's sort of come to my mind about how other video games treat end game content. Like, I believe I'm not super familiar with RS3 at all, or just RuneScape, but what it seems to be is that you're actually fighting the gods themselves, if I'm not mistaken. And in a lot of other high fantasy games, they're battling the actual gods. And I feel like Old School is so unique and actually has thrived for so much longer than traditional games where you're just fighting, you know, the absolute impending doom that's about to happen. You're fighting a literal god. There's something a little bit more special about Old School where you're fighting the minions of these gods and you're never actually quite interacting with the highest powers in the game. And I feel like that adds a bit of charm and actually creates a more sort of like interwoven sort of nature to the game where early areas still mean something. Simply the fact that Raids 4 is technically underneath Lumbridge just speaks volumes that like you're still in that beginning area for the end game stuff. And I wonder, in your perspective, like, is it important to kind of maintain this sort of never going beyond the realms of the sort of physical Gielinorian space and kind of traversing outside into like, you know, divinity and stuff? I just wonder, is there something that needs to be sort of gate kept to keep Old School?
Yeah, so we actually we have a very small set of rules on where the hard lines are narratively, and one of the most important ones is around the gods and their role in the story is one of the very few like hard lines that we have when it comes to like do's and don'ts. And it's quite simply is that like the story of Old School RuneScape, like the gods play such a huge role in it, but the huge role they play is through their absence. I mean, it's all about that there was these all-powerful beings that walked this world once, like that. I mean, the grand scheme of things of Gielinor in history isn't even like that long ago. Like a few thousand years is a long time, but like, okay, when you look at like the wider history of Gielinor, like they were around for longer than they weren't around, sort of thing, almost. Like they played such a huge impactful role, but now they've gone. and now it's just all their followers like just running around picking up the pieces basically. And that is such an important thing to like storytelling in old school, is that what it does is it enables this like this style narrative where there's always mysteries to be solving, there's always new things to be discovering, and like I think like narrative progression in old school is actually kind of similar to the gameplay progression. Like it's kind of always just like there's always something new. There's always something new to progress, and it's like it's almost like a grind in itself. It's sort of like making new discoveries, and like you don't just immediately jump in and start doing all the Grandmaster quests right away. The storytelling has that same progression as other parts of the game, and like but there's some things that are just always going to be beyond you. So you start off by killing goblins. That's both a gameplay, but it's also a narrative thing. Like you're killing like these small little minions, but they are actually minions of a god, and you don't even realize yet. And then you sort of like progress, and you go to God Wars dungeon. You're killing General Grador, like, and then eventually you come to end-game content like this raid, and you'll be there's a Bandosian character in this raid, for example, but you're never going to see Bandos himself. You see the same thing with the Majarat story. Like you encounter Majarat themselves, but you ain't never seeing Zaros. Blood Moon Rises. You eventually you're gonna be seeing Luernial Drakan. He's like he's one of the most powerful beings on Gillinor. Like you're still seeing some pretty powerful stuff, but is nothing compared to the gods. And it really also, I think, does a really good like telling the story this way. It really tells you just how powerful the gods were. If you go like, well, if characters like the Majarat and Drakan are this powerful, like what were the gods like? It just, I think it creates this really like fun and interesting like mystery for people to unravel and solve. Like, and yeah, we really like that. Like I say, it's actually to the point where it is one of the few like things where we draw a red line. Like we try not to draw too many red lines on narrative in old school, because going back to what I was saying earlier, like variety is everything, and the more red lines you draw, the less variety you're going to have. People should feel like confident enough to say, I want to work on a quest where there's penguins, but this is actually the Cold War. It's a spoof of the Cold War, but they're not Russians. They're penguins, and it's stupid. It's absolutely stupid. It's outrageous. Mm-hmm. It's outrageous that it exists in the same game where you've got vampires keeping humans as slaves, but it is also so brilliant. Like that is the variety of old school, and it's why there's just so much to enjoy in this game. Like because there's just all these wonderful different things going on. So yeah, we have very few like red lines on narrative, but that is one of them.
Now, may I ask, is there another red line that you can reveal, that's something that you're not able to cross narratively?
So what else have we got? So there's one closely interlinked to the gods. One of that's about the player character themselves, and that's that the player character is, I guess, quote unquote, not special. That's obviously not true. The player character is very special, but that they're not by default, not from the start. Like they're not some chosen one. They don't go through some like chosen one story. The whole point is that the player character should always just feel like you're an ordinary human who does extraordinary things. It's one that we've spoken to people about it before. We've spoken to players about it. It's one that I think a few people sort of like misunderstood and interpreted it to mean that the player character can't go toe to toe with like Majarat, Luernial Drakan, things like that. And it doesn't mean that at all. Like you are incredibly powerful. You're OP as hell. Like you're one of the most important beings on Gillinor at this point, but you're not that.
But you weren't
on Tutorial Island.
Yeah,
like you got there through hard work, and that's what, again, it's like one of those things where like the narrative and gameplay of Old School actually sort of interlinked. Old School's a grindy game. It's one of the grindiest games you'll find. Everything in this game takes a long time and some hard work, and you eventually earn it. Like nothing feels like it's been handed to you on a plate. The narrative should reflect that as well. So it's like when you finally start doing quests and chatting to Majarat and Drakan and characters like that, like these quests aren't endgame by any means. Like, there's still, to be honest, the kind of people who are completing these quests, people like myself, to be completely honest, like, we're still a long way off endgame content. Like, ever doing endgame content. But even that said, you've still probably dedicated at this point to be getting like to some of these quests. You've still probably dedicated hundreds of hours in a lot of cases. So like you've done the grind. You've earned the right narratively to interact with these characters. But you come off Tutorial Island. You're baking a cake. You're killing a few goblins and that sort of thing. You start with a mundane and then you slowly work your way up. So that's another one of those like red lines that the player character can absolutely do extraordinary things, interact with extraordinary people, but as you say, they weren't destined to do so. It could have been anyone else. I mean, it's an MMO, quite literally. It could be anyone else, sort of thing, and it didn't happen by default. That's another one. What are the others? Some of the others are a bit more, I guess, like they're not like complete like narrative only like rules. They're more sort of like combined narrative and gameplay a bit. So like one example is that everything has to be I don't know what the best word is, like sequential. You can't do things out of order, which is kind of like half narrative, half gameplay. What it basically means is that you can't do the Blood Moon Rise until you've done Sins of a Father, sort of thing. But you can never like skip content and skip narrative. A narrative always has to occur in the correct order. So that's another one of the rules we have. But yeah, just the first ones, they're sort of the main ones. They're probably the biggest ones. The one about the gods and the one about the player.
Now, you mentioned something about, in the Fractured Archive, we're going to be fighting another one of the Bandosian generals. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that's Bork and the Smorks. And then we also got Ezekiel and the Archive Guardian. So are you able to share a little bit about the lore behind these guys?
Yeah, so Bork and the Smokes, he's a really good example of one of the things I was on about earlier, where people who were playing back in like 2008 might remember Bork. He was a character who was added around the same time as While Gothic Sleeps, I think a few months before. And whilst he doesn't appear in While Gothic Sleeps itself, his narrative is kind of like a little bit interlinked to that story. There is some connections there, and so we sort of like used that as a starting point of like, okay, there's a character here that we're probably never going to do anything with this character. Like we're probably he was in the what was it called, the Chaos Tunnels, which was like the huge ass Slayer dungeon under the wilderness. Right, realistically, we're probably never going to do anything like that. We're probably never going to do anything with him. He had some ties to summoning as well, I think, of like his drops and stuff. So like, he's not fitting for Old School really, unless we find some fun like twist, like what we're doing here, where we like sort of take that character and like put him in a completely different situation. So that's what we've got with him, where it's a character that people will remember, but that for all intents and purposes, like gameplay wise, it's completely different. Like it's not the same boss fight. It's a completely new boss fight in this raid, but there's some fun like little narrative links there, and it'll let us do something fun with that character that otherwise we probably wouldn't have done. And then also, as obviously mentioned, we've also got new characters as well, and Ezekiel is a good example of that. He's not a character that has ever appeared in like Old School or any version of RuneScape before. He's a brand new character, but he is based on some Old School specific lore, the lore of the Justiciars, which was something that we first created for Old School all the way back with the Theatre of Blood, and it was a fun opportunity to sort of like use them again. Like that's perfect to have like how can we have like a boss that's got a Saradominist feel like, because I mean While Gothic Sleeps, the Saradominists are helping you, like you're aligned with the Saradominist in While Gothic Sleeps, so why would you now be fighting one? It's like, well, we've got these Justiciars who these days are kind of like they sort of stand alone. They work alone. They don't work with any existing Saradominist organization. They're really old. They've been around for a very long time, and they like to do things a good old classic way. They don't even like a lot of the modern day Saradominists, and I guess we're kind of talking about a thing I was kind of just mentioning about, like, this is why it's more fun not having the gods around. If the gods were around, like, everything would be, I guess, absolute fact. This is what Saradomin wants. This is how he wants you to do things. But because he's not here, we can have one group of Saradominists who believes one thing, and this guy who believes something else. And as a result, we can literally have Saradominists fighting Saradominists. So that's where we've got him. So you can like fight him as a boss in the raid, and obviously, we've got the Guthix element as well with the Archive Guardian. You're aligned with the Guthixians, so like like Guthix followers and stuff like that aren't going to fight you intentionally, but this Archive Guardian, its sole job is to protect the archive. It doesn't realize that you're here to help, so it's going to oppose you as well. So it's, and you could like, even just from these three, and obviously there are more bosses that we've not revealed yet. But even just from these three, you can sort of like already start to see that the huge variety in this raid, unlike the others. Like Theatre of Blood, all the bosses in there are all like, don't get me wrong, they've got their individual variety, individual stories and stuff like that, but ultimately they've all been put there for entertainment. In the Tombs of Amaska, they're all there to like sort of like guard the avatars. But here we can have different bosses that have completely different reasons for being here, and that's really quite fun.
Yeah, these look absolutely incredible. I have the little like clips up showing the animations, and it is just mind-boggling the difference between animations of, you know, the Black Knight Titan, for example, and these, you know, these new guys that like are fully fleshed out and look so modern. Do you ever, you know, have a concern about that sort of evolution of the graphics in the game? I know you guys walk a tightrope with keeping old school feeling very old school in terms of graphics and the visuals, but have you guys ever considered, and not to say I'm advocating for this whatsoever, but I am curious, just as you know, with the team, do you guys ever consider cleaning up some of the very, very old sort of art style of like tree trunk legs and feet for these old NPCs like Necreals and the Black Knight Titan, etc.?
Yeah, as you say, it's very much it is a tightrope. Like, it's, to be honest, I think it's also one we still haven't really come to a definitive answer on like where exactly the line sits. Like, I mean, we could pretty safely say at this point that there are things in this game that are sacred, that like shouldn't be touched, like, unless absolutely necessary. Like we shouldn't be like completely redesigning like Lumbridge and Varrock and that sort of thing. I mean, hell, even when we added a pub to Lumbridge like quite a while back, even that alone was enough to get a lot of people upset. Like, you can see the like the love people have for it. Obviously it's weird because like it's like adding a pub to Lumbridge, like I mean, most people, once they reach a certain point, they're not going back to Lumbridge regularly. Like, if we hadn't put a news post out about it, how many months would it have taken them to realize? And there's some really fun examples like that where, for whatever reason, like sometimes even just accidentally, like something's not been mentioned that has happened, and people haven't even realized that this thing that is so important to the nostalgia even got changed. And you it's sort of interesting to argue. It's like, well, if you didn't notice, why was it important, sort of thing. But obviously it is important, like it matters to people, like, so there is these things that are sort of like sacred and shouldn't be touched, but then there's obviously other things where you do get a lot of room to maneuver, especially with new stuff, like a new raid, like that's sort of like you're coming at this later in the game, like it's not that sacred nostalgia hit, it's something different at this point. It can afford to be a bit braver, more ambitious, and stuff like that. As long as it does feel fitting. I think it does. It is often actually, I think, tie into the narrative and stuff as well. Of like when you're fighting more powerful beings, it kind of almost makes sense. They sort of like start slightly breaking the rules of how old school should look a bit. It shows how powerful they are. They're different. They're unique. They're weird. But Lumbridge is Lumbridge. But yeah, then the problem is, where between those two complete polar opposites does the line lie? And as you say, stuff like graphically updating old models. What do we define as old? That's really interesting. Like, Varrock was graphically updated mere weeks before the 2007 backup was taken. The version of Varrock that we say is the version of Varrock, the nostalgic version of Varrock, well, the time that backup was taken was brand new. Like, it had only been in game. Like I said, I'm pretty sure it had only been in game a few weeks. So is that iconic? Is that nostalgic? If we changed it to a version from like 2006 and earlier, would that be more nostalgic? Or, like, it's an interesting question. I mean, obviously, Varrock, when Old School was first released, didn't have the Grand Exchange. But then we re-added the Grand Exchange. But the Grand Exchange we added was identical to the one that was added later in 2007 anyway. So, like, where's the line there? All this is also all built on a completely, like, I think this is something that people often forget as well. Ultimately, a completely arbitrary date.
Oh
Like
yeah.
that date in August 2007 was not through choice; it was through necessity. Like, um, obviously we keep backups now. We keep a lot of backups. We do things properly now. But back in 2007, Jagex was doing things a bit more the Jagex way. The fact that that was the only backup is still absolutely outrageous. I mean, I presume there was obviously, presumably at some point there was obviously significantly more. I presume they were keeping regular backups, but that just as the years go by, things get lost, things get misplaced. It's wild to think that big companies do that, but they absolutely do. They do it all the time. And Jagex has obviously sometimes been particularly bad at that, but it's not unique to Jagex. You hear all the time these weird horror stories, like these huge companies like Amazon like losing things. It's like how are you doing that? Like that tape was the only one. It was the only backup that they were able to locate. That date in August, like that, the reason that Old School was based on that date was not through like some big like complex plan of choosing a specific date. It's like this is the one that's available, and thankfully it was from an era that worked quite well. Like people are nostalgic about the 2007 era. It comes just before the controversial things of like the change to wilderness trading, that sort of thing, before the addition of a grand exchange, which at the time was also still like a bit like, oh, is that right? Should we be having that in Old School? Obviously took a couple of years to get that. It just so happened it was a pretty reasonable date to work with, but it was still random. And had it been, I mean, what was it? That was the week before God Wars. So God Wars is quite easy to add to Old School, but I mean, that alone just sort of shows the example there. Sort of like God Wars dungeon, such a huge, impactful update. Like even now, even with all the new additions to Old School, like God Wars still plays such a huge, important role in like in like gear progression and that sort of thing. Yeah, stuff like that. It is all so arbitrary, and yet it's so important. Like, yeah, I've said a lot of words here. I've not really answered a question at all. Like I can say, I don't know. There probably isn't really an answer. It's one I don't know if this
Yeah.
one will ever truly work out. But like, in general, it's still something we're very cautious of. Obviously, the elves is a really good example. Obviously, we balls that one up. We didn't do the right thing there. Like, and yet at the same time, you can sort of see and understand why it happened. Like those elf models, are they nostalgic? Not really. No one
Yeah.
cared about how the elves looked. Did they look good? No, they looked horrible. They're the worst of both worlds. They didn't have old school charm, nor are they nice like modern like graphics. Like they just didn't look great. So I can completely understand why we ended up in a situation where, yeah, people aren't really nostalgic about these and they look horrible. Let's change them.
Hmm.
But obviously it didn't work out that way. We got that wrong, and like um, there's been other old things we graphically updated, and again, it's one of those things. Sometimes I wonder if people even realize we've done it. Sometimes we did a graphical update on the Dragonkin when we did Dragon Slayer 2. But Dragonkin had only been seen in one cutscene at that point in Tale of Two Cats. I don't think people even realised we graphically updated that Dragonkin. It was also a very minor graphical update of we kept their vulture style looks. Also, I know like in RuneScape a few years after that they did a graphical update to Dragonkin that turned them into more creatures that looked like dragons. And we just did a small one, and like, yeah, that was completely fine. That was an old model. Like, should we have touched that? And yeah, we did it, and nobody had any issues. There's been other examples as well. Trying to think.
There's been examples of you downgrading graphics, like the rocks. I remember on Old School release looked a lot different,
Yeah,
and then you
yeah.
turned them back into the classic models. And there's one other example I was just thinking of, just lost it. But yeah, it really. Oh yeah, it was the Varrock guards. You know, you mentioned Varrock, but the Varrock guards
Yes.
looked super uncanny, and then you just reverted them back to sort of the Falador guard
Yeah,
look, which
but
I thought
that's
looked
one
much
that
better.
we polled that and it failed, and we did it anyway. That's outrageous. We polled something, it failed, and we did it. Like it's really interesting. Obviously, well, so to be clear, we didn't just do a poll, it failed, and then we did it anyway. It was like there was a huge gap of like multiple years, and like attitudes and opinions
Yeah.
had changed. But I remember at the time we polled it, people were being a lot more like purist, and I think there's also been a certain, I was like, earning people's trust. At the time when Old School first launched, I think it's fair to say that trust in Jagex was pretty much at rock bottom. And
Yeah.
I mean,
Good point.
don't get me wrong. I get why. It's why old school exists. Like Jagex made some wrong choices around like 2012, 2013. It's obviously unfortunate, but they made wrong choices, and we now live in this world where old school exists because of it. And it's a really weird one. I remember Mod Pips, the previous CEO, he said that he weirdly by the end he actually came to appreciate EOC because it set us on this path, which is a really weird way of thinking about it. But I totally
Yeah.
get what I totally get what he means. It's sort of like because the way he sort of described it is like he wasn't just saying this to try and be controversial or anything like that. He's like his reasoning it made perfect sense. He was sort of like saying that EOC was the breaking point. It was the straw that broke the camel's back, but let's not pretend there weren't already glaring problems of like the way the community was starting to like fracture. Like EOC was the final nail in the coffin, but there was already things in RuneScape that people weren't happy about. MTX had already been added by that point. The Dailyscape, as people call it, was already starting to become quite a major thing. Things like power creep and stuff like that. Things were moving in a direction where the community was starting to fracture into different like camps basically of people who wanted this bit but not that bit and this bit but not that bit. Like it was kind of beneficial in a way to have something so polarizing as EOC to basically force that split to happen properly, and that Jagex as a company and RuneScape as a franchise was able to actually grow better because of it by having, all right, now I've got the old school version, people want this, I've got RuneScape 3 for people who want this. You no longer have to be arguing with yourselves. You can just both groups can just go off and enjoy the game you prefer. They obviously sometimes still argue. There's still that rivalry, but
Yeah.
on the whole, like I totally get what he was saying. Like it actually in some weird way, as terrible as it seemed at the time, maybe it was a good thing in the long term, like because it gave us old school. But it is interesting all the same. But yeah, like
No, it was the
yeah,
best update that's ever happened if I really think about it. I mean, me as a content creator for over 7.5 years now, it's like this would have never happened because I wasn't into RS3. You know, as soon as microtransactions hit a game, I'm out. Like I don't find the achievements to be worthwhile anymore. You know, as soon as there's just a way to pay for it. So it's very interesting that and you kind of related to it, just that hitting rock bottom, that sort of like, okay, something needs to change, and that was just again the nail in the coffin, and it was necessary. It totally was, and we have something so beautiful now, and you guys have somehow nurtured it so properly, which is it truly is an unbelievable feat to just take a super ancient game with zero trust in the team basically initially, and then build it up over time and have this game that's absolutely thriving. And somehow you guys have just, I mean, again, like when we're talking about the quest lines, they're all over the place, and yet there are just some very out there rules that you just sort of the boundaries of creating a game, and somehow it all sort of fits and it all feels right. So I'm always extremely impressed when I think about how far this game has come with how little you guys had at the beginning and how little trust in everything you guys had, and somehow you've built it all back up and more. So very impressive.
yeah, it's good to reflect sometimes. We maybe don't do it enough, but yeah, sort of when you think about like yeah, where things were back then, when old school first started, like I think some people forget as well. People with the way people talk to them, they talk about like it's almost like old school was as soon as it launched, everything was great again. But like I think people forget that old school launched it was only a few weeks after the full launch of EOC. It wasn't like EOC was this bad thing that happened and everyone lived in a dark transformation when old school launched and fixed it. It was only a few weeks afterwards, which I think partially shows just like how negative people received EOC. That like EOC happened, it only took a few weeks for Jagex to go, okay, yeah, we have to give them something to sort this out, sort of thing. But it also like it's that reminder that things did happen very gradually. Old school launched, and it wasn't immediately like things are great again. When old school launched, it was only like, I mean, there was very few players initially. Obviously, people have heard the stories of I think like senior staff at Jagex at the time were just sort of like, yeah, we'll launch this and probably make a little bit of money out of it, but it's probably not going to be anything long term, sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And as obviously I was mentioning, you see it in like the early polls, all that just complete lack of trust in Jagex, that people were voting no to like even the tiniest of changes, like so scared of like doing anything with Old School, and you just actually slowly see that actually this is a very gradual process. It wasn't probably until like I'd say, well, let's say like probably 3 or 4 years in, like for me, 2017 feels like the point where Old School really actually probably started to find its feet.
Yeah.
And that wasn't until like 4 years after it launched. I think like 2017 with it was that double whammy at the start of 2017 with James and Zarek going into the Inferno a few months later. I think that double whammy really helped sort of sell. I was like, okay, we're starting to see something here. This isn't just the don't get me wrong, that's not to say there hadn't been good updates to Old School before that, but I think the updates before that had been a lot more cautious, like playing it maybe a bit safer.
Yeah.
Chambers of Zarek and Inferno, I think, were the ones that showed that no, actually, Old School is more than just that little nostalgia hit. Which, don't get me wrong, it was. Personally, I never like it when people say Old School isn't about nostalgia, because it absolutely is. So we should never deny that. Nostalgia is so important to what we do, but it isn't the only important thing of what we do. And things like Inferno and Chambers of Zarek, they really showed that actually there's some ambition here that we can create a game that stays true to those roots while still doing new things, adding new content. Like the Inferno in particular. The Inferno poll was probably also a big part of it, because that first poll, first blog and stuff like that, where it was just, should we just add more waves after Jad, I think really showed that shift in ambition, that it started off as, again, just playing it safe, like, oh, should we add a new different coloured cape and a few more waves after Jad? And from that it goes, actually, no, let's be ambitious. Let's add a brand new minigame with a whole new boss and stuff like that. That's even more challenging. Hell, say even more challenging. I mean, even to this day, I mean, Inferno is getting towards like 10 years old, and there's still plenty of people who say it's probably still one of the hardest pieces of content in game. Like, it really shows that sort of level of ambition there. Like, it felt like that was where things started to shift, and we started to see that this is a game that can actually stand on its own 2 feet and can actually be like big. This can be a big game. This can be more successful than RuneScape even was back in like 2007. I say that. I think, had you said that to us then, I think we'd have still put in sort of surprise. I think at that point we were starting to think, yes, we can be successful. I think if someone said back then, you're going to actually be more successful than you were in 2007, I think we'd have laughed. And then we did it. Like, with the last couple of years, we have now managed to trump those numbers. It's like, oh, wow, okay, interesting.
Yeah, absolutely insane. And to think about, the demographic of this game as well. Like, we're entering our 30s and some getting close to 40. And it's like, wow, okay, like somehow you guys have held on to this aging player base with families and everything else, and yet still somehow keeping true to the grind of the game. There's just been very, very little bits of trickle that has felt more modern and a little bit more relaxed on the, sort of masochistic grinding mentality that Old School really had in the beginning. We've really loosened the reins on that, and I think you guys have done it in such an appropriate way that feels just appropriate for the time period and appropriate for the demographic, while still keeping true to what Old School is. And we see that in these blog posts where you guys are very transparent with the community, talking about, your own fuck ups and stuff, and just how you guys want to realign with what Old School means to many of us. And it's just an impressive thing to somehow, especially after devs leave and come and leave and come, it's just like there's this dynamic, ever evolving game, and yet it somehow still holds true to what Old School is, even if we can't define that. Yeah,
it is so hard to define.
Just impressive.
We've sometimes described it as like Old School is a game that simultaneously respects your time and disrespects it. Which is such a weird way of describing it. Like, but it does actually kind of make sense. Like, it is a grindy game. Like, it's there's no way around it. Like you're in it for the long haul here. This is not a game where you're going to be able to just like get what you want with a snap of your fingers. But at the same time, it actually does respect your time, because when you look at I should be cautious of bad mouthing other people in the industry, because that's rude. But I think it's fair to say that there's definitely some things that other games out there are doing that not everyone agrees with, especially when it comes to like respecting your time and like the fact that Old School, like you level up and you've got that level. You know, it's not going to get taken away from you. You complete that quest. You've completed it. Fantastic.
Yep.
You earn that piece of gear. That's your piece of gear. If you log off tomorrow and go do whatever like personal shit has come flying your way, because as you say, like everyone's in their 30s now or even old, and like life has its wonderful habit of throwing all God knows what kind of things at you, and you're like, sorry, I don't have time for Old School right now. I'm going to log off and I need to sort out some shit in my life. Oh hell, maybe it's not sorting shit in your life. Maybe it's just I'm just not feeling it anymore. It's just not for me at the moment. And you go away and you come back a year later, 2 years later, 3 years later. You've still got that level. You've still finished that quest, and that item is still sat in your bank. Like, and compare that to so many other games now, where if you fail to play for even a week, that's it. You're fucked. You're not coming back from that now. You have lost it, and like you're gonna come back and you'll be like, oh, my gear's now useless. They reset my levels for some reason. No, there was this thing here that I had to do in that event that I missed and that sort of thing, and I've just got no idea what's going on. The entire world's changed. The map layout's different. Like Old School, you can guarantee that yes, new content will have been added, but that's a good thing when you come back. It's like, great, I've now got some new fun things to enjoy, but my gear is still good. I've still got my levels. The world still looks the same. I still know where things are. There's a few new fun things that I don't quite know what they do yet. It's a little bit scary, but also quite exciting. But it never feels like oh God, is this even still the same game anymore? And oh, how many MTX events should I have taken part in to still be able to actually like compete in any competitive content? Like, so from that side, Old School respects your time far more than a lot of games do these days, I think. And that's what I say. That's that weird sort of like almost contradiction. Like, yeah, it doesn't respect your time in a way. It demands a lot of time of you. Like, but you go at your own pace, and it's always going to be as it was when you left. And I think that is something that's really important to. That's I think one of the core pillars of sort of like it is so hard to define what is Old School. As I mentioned earlier, nostalgia is important, but it's not everything. We've clearly seen that if we left the game in the exact same state it was at launch, it would have died. But at the same time, we don't want to be making changes that stop it feeling old school. There's a balance in there somewhere. And that right there, I think that is one of those core pillars that we always have to stick to, that the game should always respect your time in that way, and it should never feel like if you go away, you're being disadvantaged for doing so.
Yep. It's impressive what you guys have been able to do. What quest storyline are you most looking forward to continuing or finishing after Blood Moon Rises?
Oh, I don't know, to be honest. I mean, it's gonna feel so weird once Blood Moon's done. It's gonna be like, oh God, it's finally over. We've finally done it. We've like I was saying earlier, like this is a storyline that has been going on for so long. Like for Old School in general, it's one of the oldest storylines. Like when did it first start? 2005. What was I doing in 2005? How old was I in 2005? I was 10. I was 10 in 2005. That's outrageous. But even for me, for like my personal like history at Jagex, like Taste of Hope was one of the first quests I worked on. Like Myreque's been with me for so long. It's gonna feel so weird when it's finally over. It was a big one for something. It's one I wanted to finish for so long. Like I'm after. This is the thing I was like. Oh, this is why it's nice to have those little like palate cleanser quests. I think I need a few palate cleansers. I need to go do another riveting tale or something maybe. But,
yeah.
I suppose the kind of obvious answer, a cheat one a bit, is probably Majarat. Like that's a really like. That's a big one. That's one that so many people care about. Whenever we do like surveys and stuff, Majarat always comes out on top of like the storylines people love the most. It's also a little bit scary, I think, because of it. I mean, don't get me wrong. I think I was saying this earlier. They're all scary, to be honest. Doing any of these big quests is scary, but like I don't know. Like I feel a little bit less confident in Majarat than Myreque. I think just because of those sort of like huge expectations around the kind of story that it is. Like it is the storyline that so many people are nostalgic about as well. Like, it's from that era, like 2007, 8, 9 sort of thing. Like, many people consider like the golden days of RuneScape past, and like they remember quests like Ritual of a Majarat, While Gothic Sleeps, Temple at Sanderson are some of the best quests they've ever done. Like, there's the expectations era are so high, and it's also the one where, as I was mentioning earlier, we're being bold with it. We're taking a bit of a different direction. We're not just doing that same stuff again, so it is scary as well. As for other quest lines, I've seen people say before, it's like, oh, we the quests we get, they're the ones that Moded likes the most. And it's like, I to a certain point, I absolutely love that people think that I have that much power. Like, like that's fantastic. I think that me single-handedly is the arbiter of what quests we get. Like, but I don't answer to Jagex as the business as my employer, sort of thing. But even if that were completely true, that I was the only person deciding this stuff, like I want to make it very clear. I want to finish every quest line. Realistically, am I going to? Almost certainly not. There's way too many, and at the speed it takes to complete them, I wish it was faster. But the realities of how long things take, you can't just make that stuff go faster. Like, it's probably never going to happen. Maybe that's fine. Maybe that's old school. Like, it's kind of like I was saying earlier. There's always a new mystery. There's always new adventures. Old school should never really feel finished. But all of that said, I would like to explore a few that we maybe haven't done as much with. Penguins. We also mentioned penguins a couple of times. That could be a fun one to do. That's one of those fun ones where it is fun, silly quests, but they are actually also part of a story, and we don't actually have too many like that. Most of our fun quests are one-offs, and most of our serious quests are the storyline quests, so it'd be nice to do stuff with them. That's one I'd really like to do. I did design a penguin quest while we're working on sailing. So when we're working on sailing, like I threw together a few designs for all manner of slightly different quests that we could potentially consider with sailing. Like, we ultimately decided, and don't get me wrong, I think this was absolutely the right choice with sailing, that I guess much the same way of a combat conversation having earlier, that sailing combat didn't really get the love it maybe needed. I think likewise, had we started trying to do too many fancy quests with sailing, we just wouldn't have been doing it right. Sailing is a skill. It should stand on its own as a skill. The quests can come later. I mean, we still added like 4 quests, which I think is more than any other skills ever launched with. I think most skills didn't even launch with 1. But as a result of that, there was a few quest designs I did when we were sort of still like ideating things of like, what do we want to do with sailing? Do we want to have quite a lot of quests? And before we decided that no, that's probably not the right direction on launch, at least. I did design a few quests, and penguins was one of them. So there's this design sat there now that I hope we get to make at some point soon. It's obviously, I don't know. Obviously it could be terrible, but I was really happy with it. I was like, this feels like a good one. This feels like quite an enjoyable one. So yeah, that's one. I do want to go back to Kourend at some point. Was it after Kingdom Divided? We left things on a cliffhanger there. It's been a while now. I'd love to go back to that, continue on from that, especially now that Varlamore's fully in game as well. We can like use that in that storyline in quite a fun way.
Speaking of Kourend, is there? Oh yeah, I know. Sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say, even storylines like Elemental Workshop, I'd love to continue, even though I know people like dread the idea of having to do some of those puzzles.
they're kind of nice, as long as they're a little, clean up the amount of delays when the cart's moving and you're just glued to the station. But I'm an
Elemental Workshop defender. Like, I truly believe that the only reason people hate that series so much is because of the Elemental Workshop free puzzle in RuneScape. Like, I feel like the old school Elemental Workshop quests catch way too many strays from people being angry at a quest that doesn't even exist in old school. I truly believe that, and I'd like to think that we could maybe do a little bit better than that puzzle if we did an Elemental Workshop free in old school.
It would be cool. And it would also be cool if there was some sort of repeatability of it, potentially. If it's fun enough and there's maybe some XP alongside it, it'd be kind of interesting to make a sort of puzzle that's repeatable and fun. I wanted to just mention on the point of Kourend, are there any plans in the work right now to revamp Archaeus and Lovakang and where's the other one? What am I thinking? There's the other kingdom that it hasn't been updated. Piscarilius. Are there any chances of those getting a graphical rework in the near future? Because the Shazian and Hosidius one were absolutely beautiful, and yeah, I would just love to see those northern areas get a little bit touched up, but I don't know, because again, it all comes with priority. So what do you think?
Yeah, it is one of those sorts of things where it's like we really want to do it. Some people on team in particular are really passionate about it. It's like Mod West, like I guess we'll call him the architect of modern Kourend. Like I think he really showed what Kourend could and should be with the work he did there, and like fixing that up. Like I know he would love to do the others, and like I think a lot of us like would love to get them done as well. And as you say, it's just sort of like it's always such a challenge, like prioritizing those things, like because they kind of fall into that same category stuff on about earlier. Like nobody is going to be upset about a rework to like Lovercare. I say no. There's always somebody actually. There's one person who's going to be really upset and going, no, I loved the lava-filled mess that the old one was. Keep it that way. But on the whole, nobody's really going to be upset about us reworking Lovercare. Everyone's going to agree that's good, that's better. But
Yeah.
if you ask people like how we want to prioritize, do you want us to spend time going to Kourend and making Kourend look prettier, or spending that time on adding a brand new area of like new quests, new skilling activities, new bosses and stuff like that? They're always going to pick the second one. So that's always a difficult balance. So like, but people like will say they want us to do this and we want to do this, but if the question is always asked of anyone, like whether it be staff or player, of which would you rather have more, they just never win is the problem. So it's always that balance, like, because I mean, on the flip side, you've always got to be careful of that attitude. You always got to be careful of picking the most popular thing as well. Because I mean, had we done that, we'd have never even done the initial reworks to Kourend, and like, there's so many variables to consider. Like, what you got to think about? What about players who like new players or like returning players? Like we still get new players. Like people talk like Old School is just like the same group of people. Obviously, as we see the number goes up, like we get new players coming in. Some of them are people who've literally never experienced RuneScape before, and some of them we still get people who played like all the way back in like 2007 and are re-experiencing it for the first time. We still get that constantly, and like you got to think about what does the current look of Kourend say to those players, like if they go over and experience that. It's not just about like existing people playing. You got to think about where does it fit in like the entire journey of like new players, existing players, that sort of thing. Like, so you've always got to be careful just going with what's most popular, because it can like force you down like certain routes where you just start doing the same thing over and over if you're not careful. So it's definitely I think it's important that it not be forgotten about, and I don't think it has been forgotten about, and I'm hoping that we can get around to doing some more of that at some point, but I'd be lying if I said I knew when, because I do not know when that'll happen at the moment. But it is very much it's not been forgotten. It's still there.
Yeah, I mean, you walk around Archaeus, not to beat a dead horse, but it's like, it's just, what is going on here? The buildings are so extremely large, all the spacing is off, and it's just this purple, sort of dark, gloomy area that's lifeless. It's like, we need some serious touch up, and Mod West, I know, would have the answer to solving that. So hopefully, here's to hoping, I guess, but I'm sure it'll eventually get done. Sorry to cut you off about the whole the quest line stuff. Did you have anything else to add? Because I wanted to sort of touch on sailing, but I wanted to make sure that there wasn't anything that you were missing.
No, I don't think so. Like I say, it's kind of a boring answer, but I do just want to just continue all the quests, all the storylines, continue all of them, give them all some love.
All right. Well, you touched on sailing a little bit, and there weren't a ton of quests added to the sailing skill, but there were a decent handful of them. And I wanted to just get your take on how you feel the launch of sailing went. I know I heard earlier you are a fan of the skill, especially in contrast with all the other, super archaic skills that if put into the game today would just look so much worse than what sailing has to offer. And I'm on team, pro sailing. It's just been an incredible experience to experience a brand new skill that really feels fitting. But I wanted to get your take on, do you feel like the sense of adventure and undiscovered treasure was successfully captured by the update? Just being able to sort of have that feeling of true exploration.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess as you say, I kind of like sort of like mentioned this a little bit earlier, talking about the quests and stuff, and like when we were ideating for sailing, like there was all sorts of like ideas flying around. I mean, obviously initially we weren't really entirely sure what the skill should look like. There were so many different things to consider, like even down to like things like that you'd never experienced probably with any other skill that we'd be adding. Like sailing's the only skill we could add where one of the key conversations is how do boats move, how do things move. Like for every other skill, that's a given how things move because they just move the same way everything else is. But adding boats on the water, there's so many like conversations to have there. And like yeah, one of the big conversations was like where does the narrative like fit in with sailing? Like what does sailing do narratively? Like it is a skill first and foremost, but it is kind of a narrative expansion, an air expansion. Like we were doing Valamor, we were working on Valamor and sailing like in tandem, like for most of sailing's development. Like we were working on side by side. So like we were making all these discoveries with Valamor, like how we should do an air expansion, all these learnings from. I mean, especially from the original launch of Kourend, but even learnings from Valamor. Like obviously, we saw that the first and third parts of Valamor were really strongly received, but part two is a bit more like just like not bad by any means. People still enjoyed it, but it definitely wasn't like the smash hit that those other parts were. So even like when working on Valamor, we were learning like things that worked and didn't work when it came to like narrative expansions, air expansions, that sort of thing. And all the while, we're also there working on sailing and trying to work out like what does sailing need to do narrative wise. Exploration needs to play a part of it, but at the same time, like kind of almost like contradictory, like sailing does still need to be a skill first and foremost. And this is where we sort of kept coming back to sort of like how far do we go with exploration. There was all sorts of like fun conversations, as I obviously mentioned earlier, like do we add loads of quests to sailing, and we were like do we add like loads of new like areas, loads of new islands, and like huge air expansions, like massive land masses. Like, but no, that isn't what sailing is. It needs to be a skill. It needs to function like other skills. Like you train it, you get XP like quite often by doing grindy things. And had we like started doing things like, oh well, you're going to get XP for exploring new lands and stuff like that. Well, that's not really old school. That's not how it works. You don't get XP for running around Valamor sort of thing. Like the exploration and skilling are like two separate things. So it was a real like tough balance to try and work out like where we needed to be. We were very conscious that that it's not just weighing it all up in regards to like how it's going to feel on launch and like how it's going to play, but it's also like for less fun, but ultimately conversations that do need to have are conversations of time, resources, stuff like that. Every person who's working on an island and like fun content on an island isn't working on sailing itself. And if all sailing is just going to islands and doing other skills, like then is it actually a skill sort of thing? So it was a really hard balance to try and work out exactly where we wanted to like draw the line on how much exploration it'd be, how much narrative it'd be, how many quests it'd be, that sort of thing. Ultimately, looking back at like what we launched, I think to be honest, we were probably about spot on with that sort of thing. I think like the islands out at sea, I think we had probably about the right amount to like keep sailing feeling interesting. Feel like there's plenty of exploration, new places to visit and discover and that sort of thing, but not so much that it started to feel like this is actually an air expansion in disguise as a skill sort of thing. And same with the quests as well, as I already mentioned. Like there was some ideas I had floating around, like some of the designs of like I say there was a penguin quest, there was a pirate quest that got designed as well. There was a Fremennik quest that got designed that we are now doing. The graveyard, we had a little I say designed, it wasn't a full design for that, but we had a little pitch for that as well as a possible direction to go in. So like some Fremennik stuff, deal with that like plot thread that was left hanging, Olaf's quest of a lost treasure. That was one of them, and now we are doing that one as a quest this year. So there was a lot of ideas that did get like left on the like left behind, I guess, but to revisit later. But whilst it's one of those things. Like part of me is sort of like, oh, I'd love to have done them, but I think looking at Sailing, like I think we did get the balance about right. There's a lot of exploration you can do there. You're discovering these whole new areas, these new seas to explore, and all these things to do in them, and all these islands. And like you got the one big one with the Great Conch for Tortugans, but then you got all these like fun small islands. There's lots of variety and that sort of thing, the new activities and that sort of stuff. And there's a lot of fun little things I really liked what we did with the islands that made it feel like it wasn't just like an area expansion, but it did feel a bit more like uncharted oceans and that sort of thing. That also really helps set it aside from Valamor and other expansions as well. Like for most of these islands, they're uninhabited. You're not like exploring ancient, like these huge civilizations that have been around for years, like you are with Valamor. Instead, it's kind of like more subtle things, just like, oh, maybe I'm the first person to find this island. And the little things we did, like the buildable amenities, like you could build a bank chest in a stove, and some of those were completely pointless. Like we intentionally included some pointless ones just to make it feel a bit more like, oh, you're establishing a foothold here. You're planting your flag. You're the first person to visit. And then there was like more subtle, like little like narrative things, like nothing too in your face. Like you go to one island and there's just this corpse of a dragonkin next to the strike worms. It's like, oh, okay, there's oh, that's interesting. What could that mean? And like, but we intentionally didn't explore it any further. Just like plant these seeds that we can maybe use later, things like that. Same with like the weird like furnace that we used for the cannonball furnace. We could have just put a normal furnace. I'm like, let's put a little like narrative tease there for like some stuff as well, fun little teas like that. So it was a lot more about planting seeds that we could explore in the future. And I think that was like the right way to go about it, because now what it means is that sailing as a skill, I think, launched, as I say, combat aside, which openly admit, like I think that didn't quite really get the time it probably needed. Sailing launched in a pretty good place, I think, with regards to like being able to train sailing as a skill, and as a result, it's now enabled us to like use it as this like, I guess, a new tool, a new tool in our arsenal to like explore new things like narratively and like with air expansion stuff that we wouldn't have been able to do before. Like we can add more of these islands. Obviously, we're adding the player designed one, Worms Crag, fairly soon, and that's coming with its own quest and narrative, which is quite fun. We've obviously got the graveyard as mentioned, so we're already starting to see now that sailing is now enabling us to expand like narratively into areas that maybe we wouldn't have done otherwise, and that's really fun. That's really exciting. So in many ways it is kind of like more about the potential it's now unlocked, is what's really exciting to me, more so than maybe what it launched with.
Yeah, no, I think overall I'm a huge fan, and I love as well, because I thought initially when Sailing was going to drop, there was going to be some sort of like procedurally generated type of islands where it's like this sort of endless discovery. But it really does feel so much more old school and just so much more RuneScape in general to have like solidified areas. And I think just the scope of potential expansion out in the ocean is just, it's vast. And obviously there's infinite amount of stuff you could continuously add. Also, how far is Vampyrium from like the mainland? Is that like really, really far east?
So for Vampyrium, like we don't like, well, we intentionally leave it vague in game to stop things feeling too sci-fi, but the idea is that it's like beyond Gielinor. You can't get there from Gielinor without like using like
Okay,
some
so it's not even on like
powerful
the world map.
magics. Yeah, exactly.
Interesting. Okay. I just assumed it was like super far east that like technically wasn't considered Gielinor anymore, but I guess it's sort of like Xanaris where it's not even on the map.
Yeah, as I say, like it's one of those things where we are always really cautious of a fantasy game like Old School starting to feel too sci-fi. So we always try to leave it super vague. In fact, and one of the things I noticed when working on it was going back and looking for all quests. In Sins of a Father, Vanessa refers to her home world, and I'm like, oh, I don't like that. I wrote that, but I don't like that. I changed it to homeland, I think, or something. It's like, and misses the mark that in hindsight, looking back at it, homeworld feels too sci-fi. Like for the, like it's just
Yeah,
it's
true.
just a little wording thing. It's like it's always really important that things feel like fantasy, like unknowable, like Vampyrium. Is it a world? Is it a land? What is it? Where is it? Sort of thing. It's not. Those aren't questions you can easily answer. Like it again adds to that mystery, discovery, that sort of thing.
Would you be in favor of a new skill? And if so, do you have any idea of what you would like to see that be?
So I go back and forth on this one quite a bit. I think it's fair to say, like, in the nicest way possible, like sailing was obviously like it was huge. I wasn't even working on it from the start. Like some of the others, Mod Elaine and Mod Husky, they were on it from day one up until the day it launched, which was like about 3 years. Like 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 holy shit! Like there's just AAA
Yeah.
titles that get made in 3 years. Like that's a long time to be on something. I was only on it for about half of the time that it was in development. But even then, I came to it and I was like, oh, I am I am burned out, to be honest. Like I need a good break from this sort of thing. Like, and I don't know. I don't know if it's been long enough. Whenever anyone talks about a new skill, I sort of like, oh god, please no, not again. Like. But I think the reality is like
Yeah.
I don't. I think that what we saw with sailing, I think it showed. I know there was naysayers before it launched. I know there's still naysayers after it launched. But I think ultimately what it does show is that old school absolutely can have new skills. Like it's not to like discredit the naysayers. Like plenty of them have completely like valid criticism. They had valid criticism before it launched. They still have valid criticism now. Like I mean, again, I've like openly said like I agree with some of the criticism. Like the combat criticism that's completely valid criticism. Like it all makes like perfect sense sort of thing. But all that aside, like none of this criticism is sort of like on a fundamental level that I think that we were seeing. Maybe early on, sort of like that fundamental like new skills aren't right for old school. They are not old school at all. One thing that sailing makes me quite confident in is that yes, you absolutely can have new skills added to old school that aren't going to completely and utterly like change it in a way that some of these things like EOC or daily scape, that sort of thing, that a new skill does not equate to those things like some people were worried that it would. It shows that a new skill can happily sit alongside the existing ones, and you can enjoy it and engage it if you want to, and if you don't want to, like you might have to from time to time. Just like if you probably don't enjoy fire making, but you have to engage it from time to time. But it's never to the point where it's going to make the game like something that it shouldn't be. So with all that, I sort of like we can add a new skill to old school. It works. Sailing shows that it works. You don't have to love it, but like I struggle to believe arguments where people claim that it now means that old school is not what it should be. So I fully expect that we will see another new skill. I don't think we'll do them that often. I don't think we're talking about like every 2-3 years thing here. I think we're talking of like new skills are gonna be like 6, 7, maybe even more years apart. Like it would not surprise me if in 10 years' time we haven't added another one, sort of thing. Like we're talking like big long periods of time before we see another get added. Thankfully, what I think that also means is that for those of us that worked on the same, we've got plenty of time to unburn from it, which we're probably getting there, sort of thing now. And sailing was obviously a unique challenge as well. Like I do feel in some ways we may have picked the hardest one for the first one, and I certainly hope that nobody's going to get nobody gets the I hope nobody gets the impression that oh now the next skill is going to be even more ambitious, because holy shit, I don't think it can be even if we wanted it to be. Like sailing was more than just a new skill. Obviously, as we've discussed, like one of the challenging balances was like well it's also an air expansion and it's like exploration and like narrative and stuff like that in ways that like. Does fire making have narrative? A little bit, I suppose. There's a little bit of like narrative behind different tree types and stuff like that. But even then, that's narrative stolen from woodcutting. Like it's not a narrative skill in a way that like sailing. There's so much narrative there. But then things like obviously mentioned like how does a boat move? Are we ever going to add another skill where we have to create a whole new movement system? Probably not. Like there's just so many challenges there that are unlikely to happen with another new skill. So sailing is probably as ambitious as we could get as well. So I feel like any new skill that comes after it is going to feel it's weirdly, it feels really negative to say something's going to feel easier, but like easy is not always a negative thing, I don't think, and it's good. That's a good thing. It's a thing that it's going to be more straightforward. I think future skills we're going to have a much better time with. Like we know how to do it now, and we're not going to be doing something as crazy as saying where we have all these other variables to consider. So I definitely think we'll be doing another one at some point. I don't know when. Like there's no current plans for another one yet. We're quite happily now just getting on with all the other things we want to do. Like that's the other thing. We're well aware that with sailing that it does have an impact when you work on something that big. Sailing had more like people working on it than any other project's ever had. What that ultimately means is that's less people working on other stuff. That is a balance that you need to be very careful with. We've got people who really like quests. We've got people who really like bosses. We've got people who really like PvP, skilling, that sort of thing. And every person who's working on adding a new skill is not working on those things. So like we are not rushing into adding a new skill because we know a lot of time was spent on it, and we now need to make sure we're spending time doing all the other things that the game also needs because variety is so important. So there's like it's not something we're really talking much about at the moment, but it will come, I suspect. As for what it should be, so I have a really controversial opinion here. I this is going to sound like criticism of RuneScape 3. Quite the opposite. I'm jealous of them. I'm really annoyed at them because I think archaeology would be such a perfect skill for old school. I think archaeology, like, it just feels like such an old school skill. When stuff I was talking about earlier about like exploration, discovery of like the mysteries of the gods and that sort of thing of like, and all these things we know into interpretation. That's archaeology. That's what archaeology is. It's like discovery and like trying to like connect things together, never really knowing for sure if you're right and like that sort of thing. It feels so old school. I'm so annoyed they got to it first, and like I hope. I know people are always so negative. Like if something exists in RuneScape, it can't exist in old school, and I don't believe that to actually be true. All things in RuneScape shouldn't exist in the exact same way in old school. Sure, like RuneScape is a fundamentally different game now. Like we shouldn't just be like doing things exactly the same way, but I hope we don't rule out doing a skill along the lines of archaeology just because RuneScape did it first, because I think it'd be something that would feel really awesome in old school, and I do worry that concepts like that don't get their time to be discussed properly because it has to be new, it has to be unique to old school. Like I think also people are sort of like, when we talk about, oh, should we do a skill from RuneScape? When we talk about summoning, sometimes people go, oh, that's scary. And yeah, that is scary. Summoning, like, made some fundamental changes. That's scary. We talk about dungeoneering. I mean, everyone loved dungeoneering, but people to this day still argue, like, should it be a skill or a mini game sort of thing? But then by the time you get onto like archaeology, it's like, oh, that's fully RuneScape 3 now. It's not the old school era anymore. It's not 2008, 9, 10 sort of thing. You're talking about like post DOC. We can't have anything from that. It's like, well, no, I don't want to copy it, but is there something there? Maybe we should be more open-minded. I don't know. Like I say, it's a controversial opinion. I know not many people agree with it, and it's probably never going to happen. But that's my little like hope that actually, sure, when we discuss a new skill, realistically, I can see shamanism is going to be back on the table again. Obviously, it was very popular. It was only a very tiny bit behind sailing, and don't get me wrong, I'm completely fine with that. I was actually a shamanism voter rather than a sailing voter myself. I actually put shamanism above sailing personally. So, like, I fully expect that one will probably be one of the ones in contention again. Will taming or something similar come back? Maybe as well, and there'll probably be some new ideas in there. But yeah, I'm gonna be trying to champion archaeology. I don't think I'll win, unfortunately, because of those connotations. But I'll be there all the same, doing my best.
No, I think you bring up a great point. I mean, again, I'm very unfamiliar with the RuneScape, but archaeology, one, if we did add it, there's so much that you could just take from, which we know is successful because we have another game, but then you just have your own completely different spin on it. So you can take all the good stuff, leave all the bad stuff if there is, and then just completely revolutionize it. And we got areas, we got Varlamore and stuff. We got these really ancient areas that can be explored. I do think, however, and I was, surprised to hear you were a shamanism voter, because I feel like that is the skill that would change the game fundamentally way, way more than basically anything else. If you're trying to add auras and imbues and other underworldly, sort of magical binding to your weapons, where you pull up to raids now and your team is not going to want you on their team because you don't have like aura number 2 from level 95 shamanism, and you just can't join in because you're not fully kitted to the gills. I just feel like shamanism in theory, just like ruinous powers in theory, sounded amazing and sounded like some cool additions to PVM. I just feel like in practicality, it is almost an impossible task, because you want to keep Old School's combat system simple. You want to just do the bare minimum with adding complexity. And I feel like shamanism is one of those really, really scary sort of slippery slopes where as soon as you go down here, if you want to make the skill any bit complex, you're going to be completely changing a lot of the core game mechanics and just a lot of the core game sort of like armor and weapons and stuff like that. Again, assuming that's what shamanism was going to be. I understood there was going to be some sort of underworld type vibe where the main map kind of gets switched into some, sort of like mushroom land type vibe, which I would love that, of course. But I do feel like archaeology actually fits the Old School feel a little bit more, even though it probably wouldn't have much connection with PVM.
No, you're not wrong, to be honest. Like, I think we often, when we were working on sailing, when it came to shamanism, we often would joke that imagine if we were working on shamanism instead right now, we'd probably have developed the entire skill within like a week. Obviously, incredible over exaggeration, but like it probably would have been significantly like quicker to make than sailing. But we always did sort of conclude. But in some ways, it probably was the right thing that it failed, because the reward space for that would have been challenging. And I know I'm very guilty of sort of like this, of being the narrative guy. I look at the cool shinies first, and then later we go, oh fuck, the reward space. Like Ruinous Power is a really good example.
Yeah.
I mean, Ruinous Power is meant to be a reward from DT2, which obviously like I was working on. So like I was so desperate for us to try and make Ruinous Powers work. I was clearing on like, oh come on, prayer's so cool. It feels so fitting, like narratively, and also just so cool. But yeah, like it is often the case if you're not careful, sort of like and like I've made this mistake personally more than once, of like focusing on the cool thing and then going, oh crap, but how now we've got to bounce a bloody thing. That would have been I think that'd have been a challenge with shamanism. I think we'd have had a much better time compared to sailing of the actual development on the skill itself, and I think it'd been really cool, unique, really fun and thematic, fun to play as well. And then we'd have then probably developed shamanism in like half the time or even more, like even less than sailing, and then probably just spent forever trying to work out how the hell we make it like fit with the rest of the game and like balance rewards around that and stuff. So yeah, there would have been benefits in some areas, but probably some pretty notable problems in others. And yeah, it comes back to like what we were saying before, like it's so important that if we had a new skill, it's that same thing I was on about before. Like if you leave the game for a year and come back, if we've added a new skill and that new skill has like changed everything and made all your gear pointless, then that new skill is that's a problem. Like that's not what Old School should be. That is always going to be it's a challenge of so many things to do. But yeah, a new skill in particular has to be so careful that it can enhance the game, but if we're not careful, it can also lead to some pretty notable problems like that.
Yeah, it's a tough one. All right, Moded, I want to wrap up this conversation with one more topic, and just I guess if you have anything on the top of your head that you want to share with us, which is what is the most interesting bit of Old School RuneScape lore that most players have no idea about?
I don't know. I should have thought about this one beforehand, because I'm now stumped.
And if not, maybe we'll have to come back for a V3 in a couple of years, and he'll be. Let me also just add in here really quick. There was so there's a YouTuber named Wizard Mindbomb, and he made a video just over the past couple of weeks of places in RuneScape that are like you cannot navigate to, like you can't go there. And there's a few areas around Zaya, for example. I wonder if you're familiar at all, but like there's some really interesting little bits of land that have like there's a little like enclave where there's seemingly a cave where you can enter sort of on the west side of Zaya, and then there's this sort of stone structure vibe that's over on the east side north of Piscarilius. And there's just these places that you can't get to, and there's several of them. And I wonder, is there any bit of like Easter egg hidden lore that has any relevancy, or are these just landmarks that were created with a potential idea and then eventually just scrapped because there wasn't enough dev time to actually fill it?
It's a real mix, to be honest. So there's some things where we know we're going to do something and we start adding the teasers, and I think in general, Old School, we're really good at like long-term thinking. Like we think, especially now, in the early days, things were maybe a bit more like well, we don't know how long this game is going to last, sort of thing. But I think now we've been going for 13 years. We can now say with pretty reasonable amount of confidence, this is not a game that's going to disappear anytime soon. We can afford to plan for the future. So sometimes we know we want to do something at some point. We don't even know when we're going to do it. We don't know if it could be like years away, sort of thing. But we start like planting those seeds. I mean, take Valimor as an example. Like Valimor was first mentioned in game in 2016. I think some people forget that actually that was how early it was first mentioned. But that was the same year that that Kourend released, and we'd already actually mentioned Valimor later that year. And then, look, we're like, it was what, 8 years, like a little bit longer before Valimor finally got added. So like that was some like very long term like seeding this idea, and we do that quite a lot, and sometimes we do it in more, I guess, obvious ways than others. Sometimes it's just tiniest little things, like, and there'll be a couple of things in the Blood Moon that hopefully people go, it's like, oh, I remember that being mentioned, like, back in Sins of Father and Taste of Hope, that, like, that's where that comes into play, and that sort of thing. That'll hopefully be really nice. That'll hopefully be quite satisfying. I think it's always very satisfying to see those like loose ends like get tied up in some ways. So we do quite a bit of that. There's others where we don't actually really necessarily know what seed we're planting. Just that we're planting something where we like to just like put something down and go, we're gonna put like using it, we'll put a cave here. And maybe one day we'll put something in that cave. We don't know what yet, but we like to leave things that even if we don't have a specific plan for now, but we might come to like later at some point. And then, to be honest, there is others that you get ones where like maybe somebody put something in and then they since left the company. So especially obviously in Old School, we get so many things like a developer from like the OG Old School from like back in 2007 left something, and we're like, we have no idea what their intention was with that. So do we? Yeah. Do we just leave it? Do we make up something new? And sometimes we really go digging through things. Like something I've mentioned before is that a lot of the story of Desert Treasure 2 all like came from a singular comment that was left in at the top of an NPC config file. So and it was an NPC config file for Devious Minds of all things. I remember like. Devious Minds, people would sometimes say, like, well, what is the most pointless quest in the game? Oh, it's probably Devious Minds. What a weird quest. Just like, you help this assassin, he steals a thing, and he never gets seen again, sort of thing. It feels so pointless, and yet, at the top of the config file for the NPCs for that quest, so the file that contained the assassin NPC, his config, at the top of the file there was a comment that said that simply said that the assassin was Sliske. And that's all it said, but that was enough to like go, okay, so this is actually a Majarat quest, and nobody at the time realized, like players had no idea it was a Majarat quest, but this comment made it very clear, no, this is a Majarat quest, and he is Sliske. It's like, right, we can work with that, and basically the whole of the Desert Treasure 2 story like sort of started being built from that moment. So sometimes you get lucky with things like that, just tiny little comments. We have no idea what the rest of the intentions of the developer were with that quest, like we asked staff who were still around, so no one had any idea. No one knew. Some of the staff who were around but didn't actually even know about this comment. They didn't know that was the intention. So no idea what else was planned. But we knew something, and from that we could build something. And then yeah, other times we've no idea. And then also you just get sometimes where someone just plonks something down, and plays like, oh, that means something. We're like, oh, does it? I don't think it does. They think it does now. Should we make it mean something? It's a delicate balance to strike. I think sometimes of these things of like you want to have a plan. You want to know what you're doing with some, especially with like narrative and storytelling and stuff. Like you don't want to feel reactive. You can sometimes even feel it. Like when you're playing other games, watching films or something, you can almost feel where they have reacted to the audience. Like you watch a film and the audience reacts to certain parts of that film, and then in the sequel you can see them responding to that reaction. And sometimes that might be a good thing, like, but sometimes it doesn't work. So when you can clearly see they changed their plans. Like, oh, this character in this film didn't land the way we hoped for, so we've now done something different with the character in the follow-on film, and you can feel it happening. You recognize it's happening, and it feels very jarring. So you got to be careful of like, I guess, changing your mind too much based on how people respond to things and how people speculate on things. But sometimes it can be really fun to see someone come up with some speculation and go, I maybe could play with that a little bit. Just make a few small little tweaks. It's finding, like I say, it's finding that balance of having a plan, sticking to it, but also being open to let things maneuver and go in interesting and wonderful ways that even you weren't expecting initially.
I'll have to definitely, the next time I get you on in a couple of years, pick your brain a little bit more. Maybe you can find some hidden code or something. I know there's a ton of it. Moded, thank you so much for coming on today. And I am so looking forward to finishing the Myreque quest line with Blood Moon Rises June 30th. And of course, I'm sure most of my audience is very excited for that. So this was just an amazing treat for me. So thank you.
No, thank you for having me. It's nice. It's reassuring. Like you didn't get to the end of the last one and go, well, we're never having that guy back again. So this is good.
Awesome.